Greetings, gamers, and welcome to the 21st live stream from the MisfitGamersStudios. I am your host, Vortex, and this is D&D Discussions. Today we are going to continue our topic, kind of continuation of our topic from last week. We did a 5-part series where I went over an old Discord D&D campaign that I ran, a server that I ran a couple years ago. And it was really fun to kind of take a look back, see what I did, explain a lot of it, and then kind of just see what I would do differently now. And one section over there that we had the whole time was this section here, I guess there, on the Discord, where it's just an area that was a sectioned out area where all the players would be able to ask any questions about the campaign, about mechanics, or specifically about how the bot ran in the Discord. And this was just an opportunity for them to sidebar with me without it getting lost, and a place that we could always come back and refer to. Gotta change my desk height here. So I wanted to save this for two different reasons. Partially because I did want it to be its own topic for my stream today, but I also wanted it to be, I wanted to expand more on just, instead of just questions and just sitting here going over, scrolling through and just talking about what questions they had and how it pertained to it, because I do partially want to do that. It's one of the more, I think this is one of the only ones that never got purged, so it has pretty much every question that was ever asked. Because they most of the stuff happened in game, and in most of the chats, these were if you were thinking about something and wanted an opportunity to ask. Which, if you don't currently do, as a DM, I would suggest having some sort of way, some sort of open communication with your players, in order to give them that opportunity. And something like a Discord is really great because it allows everyone to see what's been asked, and it just doesn't. It allows you to not have to, answer so many times, especially on really specific things. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is this is a topic that's very it's very important to me. It's a very hard-hitting topic in terms of DM questions, how to handle them, and it plays, I guess, into the sense of the role of the DM, in my opinion, because obviously the gaming group is going to have their own ideas and their own interpretations of how they want to play together. And of course, when you have a more stable group of players and players who have played for a long time together, or at least played a long time, and have a consensus on how they want to play, you can take a lot of that onus off of the DM in those situations, because at that point they're really just responsible for the storyline and the behind-the-scenes mechanics. But everybody, as long as your gaming group is that well structured and everybody has the experience that you're looking for, it's not unheard of, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, to have, everybody be accountable. But I guess where this really matters in terms of for why it matters so much to me is when it comes down to the gaming groups where the DM is usually, typically will be the most veteran player of all of them, or at least the one who seems to have most of the, most of, not necessarily most of the knowledge of the game, but has the most confidence and at least the most, grasp. Excuse me. And has the biggest grasp of what's going on. And the reason why this is also important is because I think that this, for most people, I would say their first, if they haven't just listened to a podcast or heard about it from their friends for a long time, most people will first be a player. They'll go out and try to find a gaming group, become a player, see what D&D is all about before they try to jump into not only the role, but the responsibility and the weight of being a DM, because it's not just storytelling, but it's knowing certain mechanics, it's knowing how to keep the game flowing, and a lot of that you learn with playing. And it's always been important to me to be a DM that was open and educational. I mean, not necessarily, I don't want to sit there and play the game for my players. I don't want to sit there and answer the same question, 10 times in a gaming session, but I do want to be that resource because I want my players to have fun. I want them to expand and explore. And without them being able to do that in their own way, I feel like the DM will also themselves not enjoy the session as much and not enjoy the campaign as much if their players aren't getting as much out of it. So it's kind of a two-way thing. And when it comes to I think there's obviously a couple different mindsets that people have when it comes to being a DM and when it comes to how much knowledge you should hold. But for me, I feel like I am on the side of the fence where it is perfectly normal to expect the DM to have more knowledge than the player and have more organization of the campaign in general. And being that I really enjoy having my players do recap sessions when we play. So anytime I bring a group together, I really like the players to tell me what they remember. So I first start out saying, hey, so who wants to do a recap or who remembers what? Mainly because I like to focus on what is happening and what will be happening and less on what has happened. Because at least from my experience, to me, that is one of the best ways to handle the storyline progression. You need, obviously, as a DM and a storyteller, to know what's been going on. But for the most part, the experience of what has happened is what the players have. That is what they're holding on to. Us as DMs, yes, it's nice to have gone through all of that, but being a DM is always about reaching forward. We're always planning for the next thing. We're always building out what's ahead of us, and we're in control and organizing what's currently being worked on and like what's being played, the current campaign, and then the storyline beyond it. So to me, players for the most part live like their mentalities, they live in the past, and DMs live in the present and future. And with that, it's also nice because as a way to kind of understand what players are really keeping a hold of as well, what players are actually enjoying and taking away from your game. This is also a way that you can learn that as a DM, is asking your players to do the recap, because it gives you a sense of where do you have to start off with, right? Because if you have all of these notes and you have these write-ups and you are the one who likes to do that and you have it all, that's great. But if your players aren't there with you, it's kind of like starting, an episode without looking at or starting a new season of a new series and not looking at what happened in the last season precap. And if that's not enough, if you have those people who watch it and go, hey, I know the recap, I know most of what's been going on, but I don't remember that face or that person. It's like having that situation and then just playing the episode anyway without fully grasping what's going on. And for me, I don't think that is a problem for the players to have an expectation on the DM to have that kind of recap ready. And the way that I like to do it, like I said, is have them tell me what they remember, and then at that point I can fill in what's the most important going forward. Instead of trying to make every detail important and the story as a whole, that's just kind of how we deal with life. I mean, in terms of like how the adventurers would go through life. But also at the same time, there's certain things that you can take for, I guess for lack of a better word, you can take them for granted. So you can make assumptions that the players may not remember things, or they may not be interested in remembering certain things, but the characters will. And that's obviously on the DM to just kind of insert that assumption when it's best necessary, because you really can't expect the player as a person who has a real full life expecting to remember every little detail of a completely fictitious life. And again, neither should the DMs. The DMs don't have to be there to remember everything, but it's, I don't think that the onus of I just don't think that the onus of keeping up with the campaign should solely rest on the players, because again, if the players aren't keeping up or remembering, it's either just because that's not how they work, like they don't take the notes like that, they're either not note takers or they don't have that kind of memory, or it could be that it's just not enticing them enough to want to remember, like in terms of it's just not interesting enough for them to remember. And that's where I think it's okay to put the onus on the DM, because that allows you to become a better storyteller, to become a better DM and a game master, and really give the players something that is memorable, so they are going to be more up to date with it and keep up. And I do know that there's a lot of DMs who go out of their way to do really good at keeping notes and doing write-ups and having all of those, basically having resources for the players to keep up with it. But if you don't acknowledge that there are some of your players who just, that is not going to be the way that they're interested in gaming. I mean, there are some people who don't want to read paragraphs to get caught up. They want to be more. I've always found that most people will react more when it's being discussed openly. And those write-ups, I think, would be better off in bullet point format, because then the players could rebuild the story themselves and essentially relive it, which will, to me, make it more impactful as a group than having everybody read several paragraphs of a bunch of details that may or may not directly matter to the gaming session that they're in. And it may just convolute the path forward. Whereas if you have more of a bullet point format and everyone's able to input their own memories and everyone can kind of rebuild the story themselves, it also helps put them back into the role that they were in, instead of feeling like they're having to memorize an essay that they're going to give a presentation on. But again, that's just more of me. I've never really been, this is why, modules are really hard, because it's hard for me to, read large amounts of rules or large amounts of, planned actions, basically just how the modules are written out. It's hard for me to read all of that and keep up and remember when to do that without constantly referring to it. It just doesn't work as well for me as to have something that's essentially akin to an evolving open world that essentially is exactly what is in front of us and will react to the players, versus me having a long drawn out list of things that will be happening over time. It's more about the world revolves around the characters as it needs to, if that makes more sense. But again, this is why it's important for me and why it's important to me to be that kind of DM, because I feel like we've gone over this before. Any way that you can draw on your players, any way that you can make your players more resonate more with the game and make them more invested into it is I think the goal of every DM, because once the players are invested, that's when a lot of the fun happens. That's when everyone's really getting into it, whether it's investment via min-maxing or really diving into the story and the lore and all the the backstory of everything, or whether it's just trying to get the highest rolls. All of those are very valid things that make for a good gaming session, and those are very valid goals to have for any type of player. But I think it's important for the DM to acknowledge that every type of player is going to have those different goals, and they are going to approach them differently. And just kind of like being like a good manager or leader, a DM, I think a DM is at their best when they can acknowledge that everybody has their own goals and their own agendas and their own ways to achieve their own happiness in the game, and they can accommodate for all of those instead of expecting everyone to be on their same wavelength. And that's where I think the strongest DMs really shine, is when they can juggle their own skill sets, when they can juggle their narratives and their use of the rules and their campaign structure, but also balance out how the players want to interact with it. And if you can find a good balance, I think you're going to find more success in having more enjoyable gaming sessions and less of kind of like the nightmare stories that a lot of people do, which I would, yeah. It's so funny. It's been so long since I've had like a bad gaming session that it kind of blows my mind sometimes. Some of the gaming sessions that people have mentioned online. I know that there's like a whole thing about like just like nightmare gaming sessions, and it blows my mind that there can be people like that. So I do count myself lucky that I haven't had too terrible of people. I've had a lot of bad DMs online, but luckily most of my like in-person ones, whether it's just been someone random or a buddy of mine, yeah, they're usually pretty good, and there's usually not like any super bad situations. Things that could have been done better, but nothing like super awful. So I feel lucky about that. But yeah, so I wanted to just chat a little bit up ahead on just why this topic is so important, because I feel that being an open DM, being open to answering questions and not having I don't want to call them ridiculous expectations, but without having high expectations of your players to be that involved with the rules and the mechanics, essentially not expecting them to be as interested and as ingrained with those things. I mean, everybody wants to approach D&D differently for their own purposes, and to expect everybody to, it's like I understand wanting all your players to like know all of their attacks and know every little thing, and for the most part I'm on board with that, because yes, when I'm playing D&D and we're in a combat session or encounter, I don't like when, I've talked with Kage about this, where people sit there and ask questions like, well, where's this person? And how many people are still up? And, well, how much life do I have? It's like, if you're asking questions about every last detail, unless that person is known to just be it's very difficult for them to organize, and you don't have a game map, or you don't have it like up on a board if you're just playing like audibly, I understand that can happen sometimes. But for the most part, I have higher expectations from my players, as if it's one thing to ask some clarifying questions just because all of the details can be a little bit fuzzy, but I expect, people to kind of know what they can do. But if it's one thing where it's like they picked something, they thought it sounded cool at the time, but let's say over time, they chose that, and it's like 3 hours into the gaming session, and they finally get to use it. And in the moment, I can understand them not being 100% sure either what it does or wanting clarification on an aspect of it. But being able to be like, well, what, if they literally chose a spell and then within 5 minutes, they were like, well, I chose a spell. What does it do? What does this mean? It's like, that's a little bit more frustrating. But I've seen DMs really dislike any type of question when it comes to the player's character. I have been with DMs who refuse to answer any type of questions, in terms of their mentality is, it's your character, you built it. If you don't know something about it, then I'm not going to bother helping you with it. And I really find that to be the wrong approach. It's one thing to, again, be like, hey, I have some expectations. I expect you to know what weapons you have. I expect you to understand, I expect you, if you're going to have to memorize spells or, set out a spell list ahead of time, I expect you to know what spells you have access to. I expect you to know what you can do. But if you have, but saying that you can't ask any clarifying questions or any questions whatsoever to someone who should, in my opinion, as a DM, be pretty knowledgeable about it. If that's annoying to you, then my question is, why are you on the DM route? Is it just because you just want to control the story and you want to control the pace and you just want things to flow? But I feel like there's more responsibility in being a DM than just telling a story. It's a big part of it. That's what your role is in the actual campaign's progress. But unless, again, you're with an established group with established players who have all been in agreement with this, I don't know if it's an acceptable approach to want to be a DM and just say, hey, if you're going to game with me, you're on your own. Here's the material, figure everything else out, and let me know when you're ready to game. I don't know if that's the best way to get people interested in the game. Is even if they are already interested, I don't know if that's the way to really entice them. I feel like, again, for DMs, we are essentially representatives of the game. I mean, players can't do a whole lot without a DM at least pushing the game along. So we really represent the game a lot. And if we're not willing to help players who need those questions, who need a little bit of hand-holding, if you want to call it that, or who genuinely want to obviously get better and have more understanding, I think that having a more open and positive approach to answering those questions fosters a better gaming group, as well as it makes D&D feel more accessible and less gatekeeped. You know what I mean? Like, if you tell someone, oh, well, you have to, go do all of this excess work just to want to play, it's like some people just want to test it out, and there are ways to do that. There are ways to approach that, without bombarding them. And I just think that a softer approach is way better for something like this, because at the end of the day, if there's going to be that kind of strife, then there's probably going to end up being a falling out with that player and that DM. You know, if there's a player who wants to ask questions and a DM who has very high expectations and doesn't want to answer any questions whatsoever, and who basically expects them to go answer them themselves, and not only that, but in a timely manner. I did this one Discord where the DM basically was like, no, don't ask me. If you have a question, you can look it up online. But if but he would also be very strict on like time frames. So if he said something or was going to use something, he's like, you can, it was just very weird that he would expect people to have the resources and abilities of looking things up that he did. But it was a very sour gaming group, and most of them were just, there was like two people who had been there for a while, and they kind of agreed with them. They were like, yeah, we know everything, so why can't you? I was only with them for like a month because I couldn't do it. I saw like 3 people come and go, and I was just I couldn't keep going with them. But I digress. That's an extreme example. I'm just saying that it typically, I think, is a good thing for a DM to be more open about questions, both about mechanics and about the game, about the campaign, about the story. And of course, there are always going to be exceptions. I don't necessarily agree with players who just ask questions about absolutely everything because they can't be bothered to write notes, can't be bothered to remember. And I understand there are some people who have exceptions, but there are some people who literally just, they only want to essentially, D&D is only when it's happening to them. And if you have those kind of gamers and they're just like, hey, I'll show up and I'll do things, but literally they don't read their character sheet unless they, right when they show up, and they only read their character sheet when you tell them to. Yeah, I understand that gets annoying, and I don't like those kind of players either, because it's like, look, I understand if you're here to game, I understand that's like you want to play, but if it's truly a distraction of the game, if it's like, if every time you say, hey, you need to roll, and they're like, what is that? If you say, hey, make a strength check, and they're like, what's my strength? How do I roll that? What dice is that? Like, that's okay for the first couple gaming sessions for a brand new player, but if that's just the person that plays, right? If that's someone who's played for a while and constantly does that, where they're just like, yeah, where's that on my character sheet? These are not the people I'm talking about, okay? These are not the type of players that I'm saying that you need to be open and more lenient with. Those kind of players, I don't think really want to play D&D. They just want to be there to hang out, and that's fine. I think for those players, the best thing you can do, make a dulled down character sheet for them. Literally make like an index card that just has the absolute bare minimum, because those type of players don't want to be that invested anyway. So I would say that give them the minimal investment that they're putting in, but still allow them to play. They obviously want to be there and hang out with their friends and enjoy, but they're obviously not going to be invested to that point of, wasting your time trying to educate them. In those cases, again, adapt. If they're confused about the giant character sheet, dull it down. Make them essentially a side character. If they're only showing up every once in a while anyway, give them a very minimalistic sheet that gives them only the bare minimum. You give them, big, bright, bold words that just like, hey, stats. And then it's like strength, dex. You just basically say, and then just even, write it out on that sheet of, if you're told to roll this, do this. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because, again, it will pacify them to the point that they'll stop asking those questions, and then you'll be able to anticipate anything, right? You'll be able to know, like, if you're telling them to do something specifically them, you can just say it in a different way. If you need to make them roll a stat check, you can just say, hey, roll a d20 for me. Or point at the die and just say, hey, roll that for me. That's things that you can do to certain types of players who just obviously are there to just kind of hang out. But going back to the being more open and being willing to answer questions, this is just for the generalized players who are either new and actually showing their effort and trying, or even for your longer stid players who are just human beings, and you know what I mean? Like they're going to have questions, and it's one thing to not want them to ask questions about mechanics, but when it comes to the storyline, that's really where I draw my line. Like, you can decide how you want to have your players and how you want to run your gaming group. As a DM, you can decide that you want players who know their characters, know their weapons, know their spells, know everything mechanically, and they shouldn't have mechanical questions. But where I really do draw the line with DMs is when it comes to campaign and story questions, even if it's like on things that have happened, people's names, details, this is really where I do take issue when DMs are not as open, because even if you provide them all of the details, like if you are a DM who wants to write everything out, that's great. You have all of that resource to write it out, and you'll have it there for look back on later. But if you have players that don't like to read, I take issue if you're not willing to talk to them about the story or present the story, at least in a summarized way, in a way that they can take. I don't necessarily, if you've written them a beautiful, couple paragraphs, I don't necessarily expect you to be the one to read all of those paragraphs out, but to think that because you've done all of that, they don't deserve at least a verbal summary, I would take issue with that. Hey, Cosmic, how's it going? So that's really one of where this whole topic comes up is when players want to know more about your world, when they want to know more about the story, or just when that's their way of learning. That's where I really think that DMs need to be much more open and much more understanding that is your role. Your role is to make sure that they are progressing with that story just like you are and just like the rest of everybody else are. So it's, again, it's one thing to say, hey, you need to know what your damage rolls are. You need to know what to do when you level up. Like, these are things that I expect from you. But if they're saying, hey, who's the guy that sent us on this? Or what's this guy's name again? Or so what part, or, what part of the story are we at? We're trying to get this for who? What are we actually after? Like, all of those things are, if they're asking, it's because they want to be a part of that story. Not telling them as a punishment for not remembering or not being, interested enough, that those are not things that are going to foster a good environment for them to want to care. If you're not going to answer the questions that they honestly have and that are showing interest in your story and interest in your campaign, then what makes you think that they are going to be interested when the things you want them interested in are coming up? And that's kind of my biggest thing is if you were not stoking the fire of that interest of your players by answering those questions about the story and the campaign and the larger ideas, then I don't know how you can expect people to enjoy the bonfire if you're not willing to stoke that those initial embers of interest. Because when it's finally time for the BBEG, if you've basically given them if you've basically told them to just pay attention and you haven't given them those bites of curiosity when they ask or when they just forget and they want to be a part of it, why would you expect them to care about the big plot twist at the end of the campaign, right? That's where I think DMs fail a lot, is they wonder why people aren't interested in all the work that they're doing, but when people do show that interest, or at least show that they want to keep up, and then they treat them like, well, you're obviously not interested, so why should I bother helping you? And it's like, because they're showing interest now and you're not seeing that. You're seeing that, oh, they forgot, they're obviously not interested, so why should I bother with you? And it's kind of a contradictory mindset. You're mad that you did all of this work, so you're not going to put in a little bit more work to help them appreciate it. You're just going to give up that they didn't appreciate it initially. And so yeah, to me, this is one of those really like weird topics where I'm just like, I'm usually on the side that DMs should be a lot more open about everything, but when it really comes down to it, if it's about your campaign and your storyline, I really draw the line where DMs don't want to be more helpful. Because to me, even if you have veteran players who you expect to take really good notes, if players are asking, it's me, and because they forgot or because they didn't take notes, but the fact is they're interested. If they're asking, they want to know it, and gatekeeping that as a punishment, I think sends the wrong message, and it instills or reinforces a more negative idea of even wanting to know more about it. So take that as you will. That's my hot take on that. But that's why I wanted to talk about this particular subject. That's kind of the initial premise I wanted to put out there before I actually dive into the actual DM questions I've received. And hopefully through this, as we go through, hopefully some of this will answer some questions you may have had about the Discord before, maybe some mechanics about High Point. That's what I'm really hoping that people have discussed. Is I'm assuming most of this is going to be about the Discord bot, but I'm hoping that there'll be some high point discussion topics, and I'm hoping that there'll be some other topics where I can discuss more about, again, the approach of how to handle the questions and how I've, seen other DMs do it versus how I think, how I think it would be for a lot of DMs to answer questions a little bit more. Let's see, Cosmic. What's a good campaign opener for session 0 or session 1 that isn't the overdone y'all meet at a tavern? That's a fantastic question. I love this concept. I love the opener, and this is something that I'm always very partial to as a DM and as a player. So no, fantastic question, because yes, we all get tired of them. You meet at a tavern. Let's say you have one campaign in mind, but you don't know if it's also cliche or not. So, go ahead and type out yours. Let me kind of go through my little diatribe here and then let me know what yours is. And then I'll kind of throw out what I'm thinking. But yeah, so no, everybody always wonders, we always have that cliche, you all meet in a tavern and all of that. And, this is one of those great, really creative opportunities for DMs, but I also know that it's one of those, it's kind of like when you want to create something new with food. It's almost like if you can overload yourself so easily with all of the different options and all of the different things. So I like to approach it in a couple different ways, because as a player, I try my best to add something into my backstory that'll either help the DM, tie me into what I already know maybe about the campaign and the storyline we're about to progress through, or I try to tie my backstory into at least one of the other characters if we're building characters together, because I have done that differently, where I have people do characters separate and then I have them do them together, like in a session 0. And when we're in a session 0, listening to everyone build it, I will either do one of those 3 things as a player. I will tie something in that basically is like a rabbit hole for my DM to take. So it's like, hey, I'm going to write all this in, but I'm going to leave a mysterious aspect that I don't know about, or something happened to my parents that I don't know, or I have a long lost sibling that I haven't seen. I'll give them something to play with and say, hey, if you need it to hook me in somewhere or to help a plot point along, I give them that. It's either that, or if I know for a fact, like, let's say we know the campaign is going to be like about an ancient library. Maybe I'll write in my backstory that, my family used to used to donate books, or wrote books that would be donated, or maybe used to be a librarian. Like, I would tie something in that would, again, help the DM, but also help me connect and have my player have a reason, because I think we've all heard stories where we have players who are like, well, that's not what my character would do, and this whole story doesn't make sense. And it's like, then make it make sense. You're making the character make it make sense. So I try to tie my character into the story and really do that, to make me feel more invested and make it have a reason in and out of game for me to progress the way I do. And then, of course, the third option, if I'm in the session 0 with other people, I'll try to tie my backstory in with one or more of them. So if the players can create their own reason for at least being together, like, hey, we're both fighters of a certain type, or we're both, our classes match up to a certain history. Maybe we were in a war together and now we're like, old battle scar buds. Or, maybe if you have 2 magic users, maybe they went to the same mages college. Or I've had another one where we were 2 different style of fighters. They were a monk and I was a swordsman, but we decided to have the same trainer, like when we were kids. And then we split off when we wanted to do our own, specialties. And these are just, again, not specific ways that people meet, but these help along that aspect. Because, like, for that instance, we had the same trainer. And then because of that, another guy liked that idea that he said, well, hey, I come from a different land. What if we met at a tournament? So 3 of us had already had a backstory of why we met and why it would make sense for us to move to go forward. Now, we weren't necessarily a adventuring party, but 2 of us 2 of us were essentially traveling together. We met this guy at a tournament, and that was enough to where our DM was able to essentially build out a situation where we would all be at the same place at the same time, and kind of like a martial arts festival, I think it was. And then we were all there, and then we all met up, and then something happened, and then because we were all in the same place, we knew each other. It was kind of one of those chaos ensues, everyone back to back. Obviously we are now protecting each other because 5 are better than 1. but yeah, so that's things that I've done as a player with session zeros in order to help foster a better idea of why we're all together. Now, as a DM, I take the approach that I try to take. I guess if I try to boil it down, okay, good. I'll go to what you said first before I talk. Okay, so the party starts off all imprisoned in individual jail cells. Hey, that right there, I would say is probably in like outside of you all meet at a tavern. If that's like the number one most cliche, not in a bad way, but I would say like if that's number one, I would say the jail cell probably in the top 5 and always a good starter. I do not mind the jail cell intro. I think that it's a good change up to the tavern, slightly on the same edge as cliche. It might even be the second most used in terms of the clichéness, but I do like that one. Imprisonment is a very good starter, so I'm not against that one. So let's see. So depending on the party's class choices, each cell has a built-in defect to help them escape. I like that, so you're already planning ahead, depending on what their builds are. Examples include the party's bard having easily bribed, seduced, or tricked the guard. Great. Barbarian cell door has an aged foundation, making the mortar holds the bars easy to break off, even used an improvised shield. I do like that. Oh, if they were smart enough to carry it around as a shield, that's so fascinating. Only a +1 to their AC, which is totally fine, especially because it has like slats in it. Unless you're talking about like a solid metal door. Due to the gaps in the bars. I should just keep reading, as I always don't. Come on, Vortex. I don't have a perfect solution for every class, but I can think of more for Ranger, Druid, etc. No, that right there is so awesome. Like something that you could do for Druid is, especially if you know that they have like a cantrip, or if you give them the ability to like be able to like make growth happen. You just like with the Barbarian, instead of having a weak foundation, maybe there's this tiny sprout at the foundation that they can help grow, and that will like crack open the doorway, or their cell wall is full of cracks and they see a vine growing in, so they can coax the vine into breaking down the wall, and maybe they enter the next person's room and then they can join up together. There's so many different ways that you can do that. I mean, if you want to, again, I don't know how creative you are in your world, but like what I like to do sometimes is like give them things that don't technically exist in D&D, where like if let's say you have a magic user, someone who like can, or I mean, I guess this would be more for an artificer, but let's say in the cell there's like a broken piece of an old magical item, right? Or like an old piece of just something that used to be magical, but they can feel just a tiny little bit of resonance, and they're like, it's unstable, but maybe if I wedge it in the lock and then do like the artificer thing where they charge it up, maybe it will explode and break the lock open. I like where you're going, because I like the standard, you're all in prison, escape together, but what you're doing with the individualized classes, I like that. And I would totally be down to discuss like how you could make a prison cell not designed for the class, but designed to be escaped by a class. I love that idea. That is so, because most people, I think, when they think of prisons and classes, they would think, okay, well, what kind of prison cell would hold a barbarian? What kind of prison cell would hold a mage? What kind of prison cell would hold a druid? But if this is a standard prison cell, I love the idea that, yeah, you're all going to get separated, but storyline wise, to make it justifiable, every cell has a defect. And it would be, I mean, you could even say that the cells have, even more interesting, you could have it to where once the party selects all of their classes, you do a random roll. So you have all of the cells, like you have them on the map, and you have all of the classes, and you roll randomly to assign what cell is what, and then you assign them randomly to each cell. And this is how you do it. Because if you put them all in a cell, and each cell can be broken out of individually by each class that they are, it doesn't give them a reason to party up. But if you put them in a jail cell, in a group of cells that all face each other, and they all have defects that each other can fuck with. So the barbarian isn't in the cell that has the weak foundation, but maybe they are in the cell that the druid can get them out of, and then they walk over and then they can break the cell of the other one that has the weak foundation, releasing the mage who can go to a different cell. And that's how they become party members, is because they're all basically, they sit there, they're all looking around their cell, and then they start to tell each other, kind of like an escape room. You essentially have them tell each other why they're stuck and how they're stuck. And then by just process of elimination, they learn that each other will get them out. And that teamwork, once one person's out, it's like, hey, come get me because I can get him out. And then once you get everybody out, they're now a party already, just by proxy. They've already worked together, gotten themselves out, risked their own, self-worth to help each other. Now, why wouldn't they continue as a party? Like, why wouldn't they stay? So I like the idea of you're going with it, but I might say just switch it up and force them to help each other instead of making it a one-on-one. They all have to find their own way out of their own cell. Let's see. The party was falsely convicted of random crimes, and the campaign is aimed to have them clear each other's names. Are they bought more as a group? Like a chain helps. Like a chain, A helps B, B helps C, C helps D, etc. Yeah, and so tying that idea. So they were all falsely accused of random crimes. So what you can do is you start off the campaign. They're all in the cells, and of course they start talking. Right? They're going to do two things. They're going to talk to each other, and they're going to look around their cells. So you have it kind of like an escape room where they're looking around their cells and they're talking about what they find. Right? And essentially, whatever they find is going to clue in somebody else of like, let's say you have a mage, the weakest physical person's like, hey, my foundation looks cracked and stuff. And then the barbarian would be like, looks over like, oh, I bet if I was over there, I could rip that right out. And again, you do things like that. So they get communicating about the rooms, but then you get them communicating about why they're there, because that would be a natural point. Like, why are you in? And what you can also do is secretly, when they've built their characters, you know why each of them have been arrested. Secretly, on the side, don't tell them as a group, but individually go to each one, whether it's via a note, a text message, or just pull them out of the room, and give each person a random piece of evidence or information that can clear another party member. Not everything, not like the smoking gun where like that's it, but give each person a reason to so you give the mage a note that could help clear the barbarian. Like, it's a note from someone that they know, and that person could help clear the barbarian. So now the mage knows that they can help the barbarian, and maybe the barbarian heard someone maybe they overheard someone talking about how the druids being trying to get thrown out of the forest, so they can go and level everything. So with that knowledge, they can because the barbarian overheard that, they could go track that person down and clear the name of the druid, so they can keep their grove, so they don't clear out the forest and cut down all the trees. So you're essentially doing the same thing but doubling it up. You give them all the reason to start talking about their crimes and realizing they can help each other clear each other's name, but simultaneously they're realizing that they can also get each other out of the cells. And now you have that essentially the big loop. They started in cells that they can help you get each other out of, and then the big story arc is they can also help each other with clearing their names and all of the things. Like if you had the druid, he was framed for doing something, so they can cut down all the trees, but he was protecting the forest. So that's a whole story arc. But then you can do that same level with every person. Maybe the barbarian was accused of murder because he's a barbarian, but let's say the mage, again, knows someone who actually witnessed the real murder. He has a note from someone saying, I know about a murder, and he's like, wait a second, so we can track this person down and they can confess that it wasn't you. And again, that idea that you instill it from the get-go how to get out of the cells, but then you've instilled it as the party continues of consistently helping each other, building that bond. And you can, if they try to play the whole, well, hey, you've saved me, you've gotten me cleared, I'm leaving, you can always throw something else in to entice them to stick with the group. But I'm liking this idea. I really like the idea of making kind of an escape room-esque starter that's designed for each one to use their abilities to get out, instead of designing a prison, which I'm more used to doing, which is designing a prison and keeping them in. I love this idea of designing the prison to help them get out. So I like that one. I think that's definitely a good twist on the classic put them all in prison. But let's see here. So other things that I've either liked or thought of myself in terms of because you wanted to know like what's good campaign like starter ideas. So I've done tournaments. tournaments are always good to where you can, I think my buddy, when he ran his first one, the tournament was designed where we were all part of a team. So we were thrown together and like, hey, the tournament is you go do some individualized pieces of trials. And if you all succeed, you get thrown randomly together on a team. And then you have to complete that. And so that's kind of how essentially we did that. We successfully did the tournament, and then we essentially stayed together as a party from there because, that was our intro. I've done tournaments and essentially allowed everybody to kind of have either a really good placement or was like basically guaranteed to be top 3 in all of their stats, because it's like a low level tournament. Again, it's a game 0, but they're supposed to stand out to each other, either be the top or be like within the top 3, and then they have rivals, and then again plot points and hooks. But I do like tournaments because like if you can then highlight everybody and you give them like I've done it to where it's like they could be like, hey, you're in this tournament, so you're gonna get number 1 space. So it's like kind of, if you want to add in like, what was your, like for paladins, it'd be like sword fighting. For mages, it would be some sort of like, magic testament of, how well you can control your magic. And then the idea is that they could embellish it and really show off like something creative that they made with their character. And again, that was to entice them all to like know each other. And then the essential hook after that, once they kind of noticed each other, is that there was a after the tournament, there was kind of like a quest given by the king to essentially all of the top players. And that was kind of the hook of how, well, hey, we can't just do this by ourselves, but we've noticed each other and our abilities. And then I kind of also threw it in that like all of the top winners seemed to also be kind of doing the same thing, like making smaller groups. So it was kind of like pushing them towards that idea. Let's see. Well, on the Discord, essentially this was, for this campaign, it was that they were all in the same settlement. So they lived in the same place. So it wasn't so much that they knew each other and they were friends. I kind of let the players decide if they had backstory together. And I think 2 of them were kind of sort of friends. But for the most part, they lived in the settlement together. And I let them kind of RP it themselves to where they kind of would run into each other and help each other out based on what the other person was trying to like learn. And they kind of just develop those natural friendships through RP. So that's not a bad way. Let's see. So you have a plan after their escape. They find their way to the first town of Sebastian, where they become an adventurer group, or they become the adventuring group. Along the way to register at a guild hall, a not-so-random Dragonborn child NPC pickpockets a random party member of an important item. I like that. Like a coin pouch with the needed funds to cover the guild registration fee. Nice, yeah. Those are always good little ways to get them, especially because, again, you give them a shared trial, a shared hardship, like, oh, our fee is gone or our registration page ticket is gone. That's always a good way to keep them together, especially storyline wise, is give them those shared trials. So that's good too. Another one I toyed with. I never got to launch this idea, but I was going to put them all in a ship. So I was going to have them all do their backstories and have them basically give me a backstory about why your character is essentially coming to this new continent. Or just essentially traveling down this waterway. The idea was, tell me why your character's traveling. And then depending upon how they wrote out their characters, I was either going to have them essentially do an RP on the ship and all meet. But either way, whether or not they met previously or they were all just on this ship as complete strangers, I was going to have the ship either attacked and essentially attacked and sunk. Not too far from the destination, but not far enough to like just swim to the dock, but like, maybe a couple days travel. And the idea would be that they would essentially be in a situation that they would have to defend themselves in, get off the boat, get a hold ashore, hopefully kind of like what you were saying is present them with opportunities that each one of them could utilize their specialty to help the party. And then the goal would be to get to town. They would go through those hardships, like a couple more encounters and some puzzles, and that would keep the party together because they would realize the benefit of having everyone together and learning like why, again, having them all say why they're here and what their own plot points are. They would all then be able to help each other out in achieving those. Let's see. The Dragonborn child is a hybrid of a green and black dragon. His weak breath weapon alternates between acid and poison uncontrollably. That's cute. I do like that, though. I like the idea that it alternates. Name is Echoing Jade. He has adoptive human and elf parents, but they are too busy with their guard jobs to raise him right. Oh, hey, what's up, Bobicus? How you doing? Nice for you to join us. Okay, so let's see. So right now, I'm still thinking of some ideas because we are still on this the question of some good session 0 introductory plot points, like basically what brings characters together outside of you're in a tavern, or you all meet up in a tavern because you were called here. We've gone over imprisonment, which is a really good idea. Tournaments are a good idea. Festivals can always be a good idea. Again, being on a boat, going somewhere because you're giving everybody a reason to go to that location. So you're also giving everybody a reason to help each other get to that location. Let's see. I've been really creative sometimes. I've given secret reasons for players. So like I had a cleric, I think cleric at one point was basically given a duty by their church because they had really messed up in their backstory. They had like really messed up, so they had to atone for a couple things. So basically, the church had their eye on one of the other players, and they wanted to convert him because he was going to have some special stuff in his background. And so I basically had the cleric forced to tail him. Secretly. So I basically said, hey, on the side, don't tell anybody, but the church wants you to follow this person. And then I didn't tell them that was going to be the other player's character. I just said that you need to find this person and report back. So during the intro, they found them in town, and then they realized they were the player. So they had to start following them. And then simultaneously, I had another player who wanted to be the rogue. I had their organization say the same thing because they wanted to kidnap him and ransom him because he was like he wasn't really like a prince, but he was like a royal. So the clerics wanted the church wanted to convert him. The rogues organization considered ransoming him, so they just wanted to tail him the whole time. And then I can't remember what the other players ended up coming into, but essentially I gave them secretive reasons to be around, and then they developed their own relationship, and then they decided how they wanted to act with their superiors, because I had these two characters who secretly had to report on the other. So it was really fun to watch them and decide if they wanted to actually follow through with their orders, or if they were becoming more friendly and wanted to lie and help their friend. So that was an interesting one. Let's see. Babakiss says, in media res works sometimes. Just tell him, hey, you all signed up to guard his cavern, have fun, or his caravan. Yeah, so that also works too. Giving them all, essentially, if they were all looking for work, and you gave them all a job, so they all are gonna be traveling together. That's also a good one. You can also do things where, if you want, make them all know each other. You can have a whole backstory where they're essentially a prior adventuring group, just nothing that's big, but you can have them all, coming fresh off of another adventure. Let's see. Cosmic says, hence why he's a self-taught street pickpocketer. Depending on the party's backstories, one of them will hopefully feel sympathy and relate to him, and take him in as a scout or low-level rogue if the party lacks one. That's actually really nice. I always have it fun. I always find it fun to add NPCs that can go gaming with the group. Just kind of like having your own player involved, like your own character involved outside of all of the other ones that you run. But that's a good idea. I do like throwing in the idea of, again, giving them that hardship, having all of them suffer because of the pickpocket. Let's see. Caravans are good. I've already mentioned festivals. Festivals are a good way to get people, tournaments or any kind of competition. You can pit them against each other, so you can do a fighting ring, especially if they're all. It only works with the right kind, or actually, it could work with a decent amount. You could say take all the fighters or all of the aggressive characters and put them in a tournament where they're going to fight each other. So you can right out the gate let them have fun fighting, pitting character against character, the barbarian against the paladin, and see how that works. And then you can have the cleric or the healer as the tournament healer, they heal everybody after the match, and you can just have them do that, because right out the gate that would just be a lot more fun, and they're going to be more interactive with each other because it's player on player, so they're going to be more interactive, talking crap, and they would probably more than likely RP into a camaraderie because they got to fight each other. So that could be a really unique way of like enticing them to come together. Yeah, I mean, you could do everything from like divine intervention, have them all experience, some great divine, divine quest or divine message that they all have to kind of go about. You could, I mean, you can always do the really crazy one and just literally once they've written everything, just have them all wake up and in the middle of like absolutely nowhere, just wake up. No one knows how they got there, and they're just absolutely like, you don't even have to do the whole like amnesia thing, but just literally have a bunch of strangers wake up in a room, realize that each other are there, or even in like in a grove in the middle of like a forest, or have them all like, one of the more potentially good ideas that I did get to play as a player. Terrible gaming session, terrible DM on a lot of different accounts, but such potential for the starter. We essentially got to build all of our characters, but we all woke up. It was kind of Skyrim-y, actually, now that I think of it. But essentially, we had all woken up, not essentially as prisoners, except for one of us. One of us was essentially a caravan guard, but we all woke up bound and tied in like a caravan or some sort of like covered thing, and then it got attacked. And the only survivor of the guards, like, after everything had settled, essentially, there was only one guard alive, and he came in to check on all of us, and we were basically all, on the floor or on the ground, basically, still hooded and everything. So his idea was to, figure out who we all were, get our stories, and be like, hey, it's amazing all of you are living alive. We have to get out of here kind of situation. And it was in the chaos that we formed a team, and the idea of trying to figure out what happened to us. And this guard at first was like, I can't let you guys go. So, he tried to keep us tied up, but he took the hoods off. But eventually it was like he needed our help, we needed his help, and we kind of developed that. And, I think this is a great question, but I do want to point out that I think this really depends on your gaming group. If your gaming group is of the mindset that they need to be told exactly what's going on, these are all good ideas. But if you have a group that's really, really like, they know how to play, like they know they're supposed to be the party, whether they like each other, that doesn't matter, but they know that the whole point is to group together. It's really just, it's a lot of fun if that's the gaming group you have, because let them kind of dictate that. Like, give them a scenario where they're all in there, but if they kind of know the deal, I wouldn't stress so much on why they have to be a party. If the gaming group is understanding, if the players understand the name of the game, whatever situation they're in, they'll party up. If you have to kind of handhold them, then you can do these, more elaborate ones. But I always think strife or any kind of shared trial is really always going to bring a team together. So whether it's, they're all in the same town and there's a commotion, and then they all run to the center of town where there's a commotion, and then a demon attacks, and they're the only fighters around town. Make it just like a situation like that where it was just, hey, right place, right time. Or you can, now I'm really trying to like find some more ideas, because I do like this idea of why players get together. Let's see. So let's see what Cosmic have to say. So you have a special plan near the end of the campaign before the BBEG fight. They send a second in command, the top minion, whom is a Tabaxi. That Tabaxi is meant to be strong enough to be a real challenge to the party, yet nowhere near a match versus the BBG himself. That's always good. I always like that. Like I always like to challenge my players with like the old martial arts or the old like anime kind of concept where the BBEG has like several levels of people ahead of him that you have to fight through. I've always liked that concept of doing that. Yet nowhere near strong. Once the party deals with Tabaxi, he tries to retreat. The BBG will say, well, look at what the cat's dragged in. that's That's fantastic. As a way to provoke the party, and his second in command opens opportunity to recruit the Tabaxi to help the BBG fight. Oh, that's actually pretty funny too. Um, man, if you can only slip in like the cat's out of the bag now, kind of a joke, that'd be that'd be hilarious. Oh, since he ran away, so he could say, "Look what the cat dragged in," as he runs into the room, and then he could be like, "Oh, you're so useless," and then he could do like a spell where he traps him and literally throws him in a sack, like that. He's gonna like he says, "Once I deal with you, I'll deal with him," and he like if the party decides to like save him and then recruit him, then he could say, "Well, the cat's out of the bag." That would be that's bad. I'm bad for thinking that. um, yeah, so I think it's a great I think it's a great idea though to play with the intros with how the party meets, and there's really no wrong way. Yeah, you're like yours better. There's really not a wrong way to introduce them. I do feel like a lot of people take the approach of the tavern because I don't want to say that people are lazy, but it is an easy idea. It's an easy concept for most players to understand that, hey, you were looking for a job, you were told to meet here, and now there's a bunch of strangers and you start talking. But giving them a task, whether it's escaping prison, having a battle right out the gate, fighting each other in a tournament, being on a sinking ship that they have to escape from, just giving them something that they have to accomplish together right out the gate, I think is one of the more fun ways to establish a party. The second more fun way I think would be in backstory development, like giving them an actual backstory that's already intertwined, whether they're relatives, whether they've gone to the same places, whether they've already met and they got here for some other reason. Those are my favorite ways of doing it. And if it really does make sense for storyline purposes that they are complete strangers and you don't want to, you don't want to give them something too difficult. There's always the prison route of them just getting out of their cells. Yeah, I don't know. Everything I think of, I always think of like, again, just putting them under some kind of peril, giving them something that they have to accomplish right out the gate. Because that will establish a lot of the benefits of why they should be together. And I like the idea of beyond that, how else can they help each other if they're not the kind of party that's automatically going to group together just because that's the name of the game. I think that it's a good idea for the DM to take some liberties with their backstories and kind of slip in reasons why the characters, maybe not the players, but the characters might notice benefits from the other people. Let's say you have one character who said that they had some run-ins with the law in the past. Maybe you can slip it in to another backstory that they have good connections to people and they have good connections to law enforcement. So with that, you can have them have a reason to want to group up because they're like, hey, if I get in with you, maybe you can make a good word for me and help me, help me. Oh, hang on one second. I will be right back. I got to take this call. So sorry. Hey everyone, so sorry for that. Thank you for waiting for me. Just had to take that phone call really quickly, but we are back and we are continuing our conversation. So we just went over a couple of good ideas on how to do the session 0, kind of start out the campaign and how to get everyone kind of talking to each other. I think my favorite is just giving them some sort of challenge or trial that they have to get over together, or using backstories to slip in reasons to be together, whether it's that they're already knowing each other or they have information that could benefit each other. That's usually a good way to let the players kind of take over and really like roll into a good gaming session. And let's see, here's some more from the chat. So if you ever have a time where the spell divination was used, what was the best use of it that I've seen? In previous Wednesday session, your character used a spell to learn about an incoming ambush while we were on a train-like transport system getting to our next objectives. And due to that, the party couldn't be surprised and we all got advantage on our initiative rolls. I like that. I actually really liked it, how they used that. Monday group is my Haragon 12th level, Condensing Monkey. Oh yeah, we just went over that one on Monday with Kage. Wednesday is my Tiefling 12th level Wizard 8 Bard 4. Nice. Let me take a look here real quick at the specifics of divination. Because as a player, I've been in gaming sessions where we've used it. I'm trying to think if I've ever had a player that has used this. So let's see. So divination, 4th level spell, action of 1, foreknowledge. Your magic and an offering put you in contact with a god or god's servants. You ask a single question concerning a specific goal, event, or activity to occur within the next 7 days. The GM offers a truthful reply. The reply might be a short phrase, a cryptic rhyme, or an omen. The spell doesn't take into account any possible circumstances that might change the outcome, such as the casting of additional spells or the loss or gain of a companion. If you cast a spell 2 or more times before finishing your next long rest, there is an accumulated 25% chance for each casting after the first that you get a random reading. The GM makes this roll in secret. Interesting. Okay. So, I have only seen this particular spell used maybe once or twice a very long time ago. I think what we ended up needing to do, we used it once to find, essentially we were trying to divine so we knew someone was going to be traveling and we knew where they were, but we didn't know where they were going. So I know at one point the spell was used to find out, kind of use it like scrying. We were trying to find out which direction they would head so we could set up an ambush better and catch them. And let's see, so your question was, will we be ambushed while on the transport vehicle on our way to its destination? Yeah, that's a very good specific question. So I think we used it once, and the question was along the lines of essentially which path or which direction or what location will he be traveling to, or by maybe our question was what method he would be traveling, because we knew that he could go to one of 2 places. One was by boat, one was by land, and I think the idea was we asked what type of transport will he be taking in the next week. And they said it was a cart, so we decided that they was going to go by land and not by sea. Another time I remember we used it was, I think we were trying to beat the enemy somewhere. It was a cavern or an old ruins, and so we had asked. This is a different gaming session, but we had asked if they were gonna beat us there based on our current travel. Were we likely to get there first, I think was the question. So yeah, I have very little experience specifically with divination and what was the best use of it that in terms of that way. I think that those are some of the best ideas of when you know that one of multiple scenarios is likely, presenting a question that will help narrow that down, I think are really good uses of it. But to be honest, I have used this a lot more, just not in this sense. In terms that my players have other access to ways of getting information similar to this, whether it's really high level NPCs or for like instance Kage with his character Dovd, he has a close relationship to his god as a new follower, but as a follower with a lot of potential. So he has situations like this where he, they can call upon their deities at times, and essentially it works this way, although it's a lot harder. It's not just a guaranteed, I do the spell, I get this. There's usually a roll, and it's usually pretty slim on whether or not they're going to even respond, and if they get good information to respond with. But essentially, yeah, I like this when it's used to help narrow people down in what their options are. I think that's the best use of it, because otherwise, I think misuse of this can convolute the plot line. It can convolute what the players should be focused on, and if the DM or the player aren't careful with their question and their answer, it can sometimes cause more confusion or make it overly complicated, whereas I feel like this is always meant to make things easier, even if it's not meant to be obvious, if that makes sense. Cosmic says, the thing I love the most about divination wizards is when they cast a spell of 2nd level or higher of the divination school, they regain an expanded spell slot of a lower level up to 6th level. That's actually pretty fucking dope. That's interesting. So they regain spell slots for casting divination spells. That's interesting. I'd like to know what the lore is on that. I might have to read up on that. That's kind of a fascinating concept. I wonder what the purpose of that is. Let's go back here. I'm going to lower this now. Nope. I'm going to have to close it because it doesn't want me to just lower it. There we go. So that is a cool thing. If I can remember, I'm going to bring that topic up with Kage on no, he's not here on Monday. That'll have to be the following Monday. I might have to be reminded. But I would like to hear his concept of what are some good session 0 openers, because I know I've used multiples in the past. I mean, it's just more of like, there really aren't, I don't think there are a lot of good standard ways to do it in terms of things that make sense over and over. The tavern and the prison, those I think are classics because for the most part they can open up almost any story, especially of a group of adventurers depending on how they're built. But if you have a lot of adventurers, like let's say your campaign's very religious focused, you can have them all meet at church or at a temple or during a pilgrimage. And you can, do something like that. If they are all nature-based, you can have them, I guess, just have them randomly meet somewhere, like, in the middle of a forest. Isn't any better than the tavern, but, I think leaning upon their backstories, like what they've already told you and what their motivations are to be where they are, and then also leaning on what makes sense for the campaign. I mean, if they're all going to be strangers and everybody knows they're going to be strangers, but they're going to be a part, a gaming group, again, I think the reason why the tavern feels so cliche and doesn't feel satisfying is because it feels like an empty reason. It feels like, well, we have to be a party for the game's sake, so we're all given a quest and we're just, because I mean, in reality, someone bringing a group of strangers together to explain to them for the first time the mission seems a little weird. I would prefer if you're going to go that route of they're all going to be like, worked on, or they're, the idea of like they want to hire you, is they would have to make sure that you're going to work as a team. So why not test that out in a smaller capacity and have that be your thing? Like, hey, what if instead we all meet at a tavern? The idea is they all get a letter, and the letter basically says that you have shown interest in joining our guild or doing a mission for us. But because we're, short-staffed, or because we need the best of the best in their fields, we can't just hire random groups of people and have them, and you can even write this in as a joke of, we can't just hire random groups of strangers and have them meet at a tavern and expect them to accomplish our goals. So you can even kind of joke about that being the cliche. and say, in order, for us to know that you can work, cooperatively with strangers, but also, accomplish our goals, we've set you out the following task. And maybe you give them basically all a task where they all have to go accomplish something, almost fourth wall breaking, yes. But I mean, it's D&D. I think that there's room for that. And I think that the right kind of players, especially if they're used to that, if they are kind of expecting the same old, I think they would get a chuckle out of it. I think that it would be, and I think it's also a good story-driven part, though. It would make sense to have that explanation of, hey, we need you to do this, but we can't expect you to just do it right out the gate. So we need to test you. We need to give you trials. And we need to make sure that you can, work with people. So giving them, even instead of meeting up at the tavern to be given the mission, have them all have to meet up at a location, but getting to that location is maybe the difficult part. And as they are all making their attempts, they can run into each other, realize they're all there for the same reason. And then once they've all accomplished, like, let's say getting into this place, like, let's say they have to break into an apartment, their goal is break into an apartment. They all run into each other trying to do so. And then once they're in the apartment has all of the instructions, right? Like if you're going to run, like, let's say a murder mystery, or if you're going to run hey, we need to find this person. Maybe they break into the apartment successfully as a group, and then inside the apartment is all of the evidence that they need to go, like, find the person with, a scroll that's essentially, you've been selected to carry out this mission. And that, again, gives them, it kind of just goes back to what I said before, giving them a trial right out the gate, something to accomplish, gives them a in-game reason to be together, instead of having that hollowness of, you were put together just because it makes sense that you're together, and someone needs a group of people and you are a group of people. I think that's why that one just feels a little more difficult for players to want to get into. Whereas if they can establish themselves, establish what they are, who they are, and can establish why they're beneficial to each other right out the gate, outside of just hearsay, outside of, well, I'm a paladin and I can do this and that, and I'm a great pickpocket because, I have a history with rogue. Like, it's all nice and good, but I think that it's better when you can have everybody kind of show off a little bit right out the gate, because then they kind of feel better about their character, and it really gets them to understand, oh, that's what you can do, that's what your build does. Oh, I can actually, I can come up with some things that we can do together now, because I like that kind of metagaming, talking to other players about what their character can do, and thinking about, like, what your feats and my feats and how we can, like, cross in both in and out of combat. But being able to show it, like, actually do the acts in game, I think make that more realistic for the players, or not, sorry, the characters, because the players can talk all they want about their feats, but the characters themselves haven't seen each other do anything. So giving them something like a combat, a puzzle, escape, doing something that shows them off, gives in-game reason for the player or the characters to see each other's value and want to use that value for their own good. Question. What do you think the names of my current two characters, Prelude and Bolero, have in common? I've used the character names Requiem, Nocturne, and Serenade before. It's a reference to something. Off the top of my head, I don't know. I honestly think Prelude and Minette, like Prelude and Serenade, and even Minette. Is it Minette or Minette? I think those are the biggest clues that should be leading me into something. Off the top of my, I'm bad with, like, just knowing definitions, like raw definitions. Minuet. Okay. I know Minuet. I've known Minuet, Prelude. These are like cinematic or theatrical terms. I like, that's where my mind's going, is like theatrical terms, in terms of, like, is epochs the right direction that I'm thinking? I don't know. I've always been interested in people's choice of character names because I always find it unique that when I come up with names in terms of like I don't have a method. I do not have a standard way to create character names. The best way I can describe it, character names come to me. Like the character, once I've created and established the personality and what the character is, it kind of just the name eventually fits the build, but I don't really have a standard like concept except for when it's related to Zenith. Zenith has a one kind of concept, but that's really an ongoing name. It's not so much a series of names. So yeah, I've always interested in how people come up with their names because I know mine doesn't make even sense to me because my characters just have names. Like once I've created them, they just have names. The only time I've ever had a series of names is when Zenith like does something with multiple versions of himself, but that's just more because it's all the derivative of his own name. So yeah, okay. So what did you say? So Zelda, Ocarina of Time, the named of the warped songs, Minuet of Forest, Serenade of Water, Nocturne of Shadow, Requiem of Spirit, Borlo of Fire, and Prelude of Light. That is awesome. I used to be into Zelda way back in the day. Did not play through Ocarina of Time, so I would not have been able to get that. I am not that steeped in Zelda lore, but that is dope. I really like that. Now I'm actually curious. Did you just take the first part of each of these for your name, or did you take the second part and use that for the class build? So for instance, Minuet of Forest, is that going to be like a druid type character? Did the Serenade of Water, was that some sort of a any type of aquatic or water based, or did you use like water magic? Nocturne of Shadow, was that any sort of like a shadow creature? Were you an evil character at that point? I'm just really curious. Did you fully encompass each one of the warp songs, or are you just using the titles just for essentially the Easter egg, the callback? But I do like that. I like the group of character names. That's really dope. Those are actually really cool. And I mean, it is really nice because those are all actually really dope character names too. So it actually works. Use the first part of the name, Borlo being the exception. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that would be really cool if I could find something to like make a series of characters off of. That would be really cool to find something like that. I don't know if I have anything I don't know if I have a series of anything like that would really like let me make some dope ass names from. But that's cool. I like that. Thanks for sharing. I wish I had a cool way of creating names. All my names are basically just straight from like the character's backstory, and they just kind of just sit well. Once I say them, I'm like, yep, that's that character's name. It just works. But there's no rhyme or reason. There's no they don't have anything in common, and they don't. The way I came up with them isn't like any kind of like recreatable thing. It's just once I have a character, I just know what they need to be called. So it's a dumb explanation, but that's the one I got. All right, so circling back to the topic at hand today. Circling back to the topic at hand today, when it comes to DM questions, I guess I've kind of been ignoring, or I've just been like blind to the most obvious aspect or the obvious example I can give, which really is this podcast, especially since we've really changed this into more of, it is kind of shifting more into a review cast, which I'm not really upset about. When I first started doing these, we have 21 now, 21 streams. When I first started doing these a couple months ago, it was just, I just wanted to talk about D&D. I just wanted to give my ideas out. It's just something that's always on my mind. And I didn't really know exactly how or what shape this would take and where we would go with it. And so far I've been talking with Kage off stream, and we're both really liking the creative aspect of taking what you guys send us and really just working with it, giving you some of our ideas, and just learning what you guys are doing out there. And I don't know if that's exactly what we want to like start to specifically be, is a review cast, but I am just liking exploring those, because I think there's a lot of places that there are a lot of streamers that I'm watching that are actually playing D&D, and we do want to get to that. We do eventually want to stream our games. Excuse me. But at the same time, I'm hesitant because that is what a lot of people are expecting, and I want to open up more conversations from more DMs. Like XP to level 3 is a YouTuber that I really, really like, and I would highly suggest anybody go check out on your free time. But it's like those that, they do sketch comedy, but he also does just a lot of this. He also does a lot of conversation pieces. And I think that's what I would like to see more of, which is why I'm out here doing this. But this is a great example of like my approach to DM questions. Is there's a lot of DMs who would prefer to just sit back, do their reading, do their planning, write out all their stuff, and then just have someone play their game. But this is where I thrive. As much as I like playing D&D, I love talking with people, hearing their ideas, working my own ideas out. And again, it's not always about homebrewing, but it's about adaptation. D&D and everything that's written in the books, it's all great stuff, and you don't have to modify everything, but you can adapt it to make it work for you and your players. And, that's really where I like to strive to be that DM, is to help adapt things, not change them, but adapt them, for the players and for myself. And this is a good example of like my approach to answering questions, because I'm basically this open with my players as well. Even in the middle of a gaming session, if someone's, I don't really like tangents. I don't really want people asking me questions that aren't related to the game, but being this open and excited to answer questions and get people the information that they want and educate them on something that they're actually interested in, which is my realm and my game. That's where I strive. That's where I'm at my best, is where I'm having fun just talking about D&D and really just getting into those details. So again, circling back to the thing at hand, like this is what I want to promote more DMs doing, which is being willing and excited to educate their players on the game and their story and their campaign and the mechanics, and not be as closed off and just wanting to be so mechanical about everybody being on the same page, and having essentially everybody answer their own questions. Cosmic says, Serenade was a Tabaxi Ranger rogue with ungodly high stealth. Nocturne was an Aasimar wild magic sorcerer. Requiem, aka Lucifer McPurr, was a Tabaxi Ranger druid. Borolo Current being the tiefling wizard bard with a unique way of writing his own bardic music, which dubbed him Singer of Flames. And Prelude being the rabbit person glassblower and merchant that you mentioned in the other stream. Nice. Those are some dope-ass characters. Seems to be a running theme with Tabaxi, though. You seem to have a fascination, or at least a lean towards liking Tabaxi, which I can't blame you. I mean, yeah, I think I ran a Tabaxi once. I think only once. It was a very short-lived campaign. It was only a couple weeks long. It was one of the Discord ones that I did. You like cats. They're really fun characters. I really like the versatility. I don't know. I like when people just get into what they're into. You know what I mean? Like I've had so many players that I've played with who think that you have to constantly be doing something new or changing it up. And, I just like it when someone knows what they like. I mean, I'm always about variety and changing up like the classes and the style and the personalities, but sometimes it's like I'm partial to my rogue. I'm partial to my half elf rogue. Like everyone makes fun of it, fun of me for it, but I don't care. Like there are just some things that just make you into the game, and you just got to go with it. You just got to roll with it. What do you think Borler's unique method is for writing his music? Well, seeing as how he got Singer of Flames, I mean, that could be fire dancing, that's involved with fire dancing, or that he could actually use like fire magic in it. Singer of Flames, it could also be that he can control magic or control fire with his music. He could maybe write his character sheets with like a special device that actually scars or scorches the paper. His instruments could be on fire, depending on if he plays instruments. But you say it's a unique method for writing his music, so that makes me think either whatever he uses to write is either on fire or has something fire related to it, or it could be the topic that he talks about mostly. I guess it just really depends on the concept of writing music. But Singer of Flames, does he light himself on fire when he does his performances, or does he dance and sing inside fire? Because that would be hilarious. Let's see, what else do we know about him? He's a tiefling wizard bard. So he's a tiefling, so he would be, I think, naturally resistant to fire. So it would make sense that he would either be engulfed in flames or use flames as part of his performance, if he doesn't actually spit flame as he sings, or does his performance. Yeah, I would have to say that I'm leaning towards definitely utilizing fire in the performance, but most likely because it's the tiefling, I want to say it has to do with actually being lit on fire, or again directly having physical fire as part of it. Don't know how close I am, but that's the direction that I take with Singer of Flames. Okay, so he mentally overlaps a blank piece of sheet music with the movement of flames, typically a fireplace, fire pit, something as tame as a candle or torch wouldn't work. The movement of the flame themselves writes the music for him. Oh, interesting. That's fucking dope. That's cool. I like that. So it's very essentially chaotic music, but he finds the pattern in the flames. That's kind of dope. That actually reminds me. That reminds me of something that I saw recently on Instagram where you know what, you would like this. I'm gonna look this up real quick because since you like cats, you would like this. I gotta see if I can find this again, because this was really, really. Oh, here it is. Okay, I'm gonna bring this over real quick and show you, because this was. I want to see if. Yes, here it is. Okay, I'm gonna bring this over, because this was really cool. This is what you're reminding me of. Is I found this on Instagram, and it's someone who can take portraits of cats and they turn the image into music. So this is what I'm envisioning now when you say that he does this with fire. So this is how I'm envisioning it actually works. And I just think that is just one of the coolest ideas someone has ever done, is being able to trace out the actual music lines. There's no more. I was really hoping that Simpawnees is the person. And yeah, I had just found them and just thought it was really, really interesting and a really cool idea. Borlo does that, but with how fire moves and more in a mental way. So he tried physically, but she's tend to burn. Yeah, no, and I totally understand too, because you see it and then you would map it, and then you go to the next line, watch it, and then map it, and that's such a cool idea. No, I love this idea, and that's why this just instantly popped into my head when you said that, because I was just like, oh yeah, there was someone who did that, and then you mentioned cats, and I'm like, can I? Let's see. Can I? Okay, I want to just see if we can get like one or two more because yeah, these are just such a cool idea, and I want to see this done with actual fire, because that would just be so cool to see if someone could actually do it with like a flame picture. It's pretty lit. It's a cool idea. No, it's pretty lit. Yeah, no, this is just such a cool idea. If there would be a way to have someone do this but with fire, that would be so cool. It's really interesting. What do you call this? Because I get simponies. I get like the idea is from animals, but if this was a technique of taking a picture and transcribing it into music, I would be really interested to see if there are other people who do it with different images and different things. New type of art form that combines animals is a collection of original music scores. Okay, so really this is all just someone who writes this music themselves. So this isn't even like an automated thing, which would be really interesting, but I like that they 100% do it themselves. Maybe make a comment on his videos asking for one related to fire. That would be cool. Why not? What is his most recent video? He has one 9 days ago. Before I ask that, though, let me just double check and make sure he hasn't done one on fire already, because if they already have, no, it doesn't look like they did. But yeah, this is their most recent one. There. Why not? Let's see what happens, and maybe we'll get an answer someday. Maybe not, but that would be really cool to do that. And you know what? Let's just do a Google search. Why not? Let's just, because we're on the topic. Has anyone turned fire into sheet music? I do not see anyone doing that. I'm not going to sit here and do a whole lot of internet searching for that. So that's fine. That was kind of interesting, but I do love that idea. You have such really creative ideas. I love that. I love that you share all that too. Because again, that's such a unique role play idea, and it's just such a unique concept for like a good backstory, just, you know, how you become famous. And it's it is I like that. I like the I really like just the dedication that you have to making that story personalized and unique. This is quite the rabbit hole. Too bad it isn't part of my Aragon character. Your puns are off the wall. But anyway, no, those are some cool ideas, man. I love all of those ideas. Yeah, that is a cool way of doing sheet music. I'm really curious, like, how did you come up with that? Because I saw that thing online, and that's where I would make the connection, but I would never have thought to like make sheet music based off of what he was looking at. So that, I mean, the cat thing just blew my mind, but the fire thing just, especially for a D&D concept, that is so much cooler. Thinking about that from a character point of view, like having a character sit there for all of these years being creative with art and music and just watching the fire and being able to play it in his head as it's dancing. I can imagine that just happening, where he just imagines it's like almost like fingers on a piano, and then eventually just one day putting up a piece of sheet music in front of him and just drawing it out. And that's just such a cool character concept. But yes, back to back off the rabbit hole to the conversation at hand. I do want to get to at least some of the DM questions from the Discord, and we'll just see how many other offshoots that we talk about. But this is, I think this is all in general still part of the same concept of this is how I feel handling DM questions should be. It should be open. It should be educational. It should be ever expanding for both player and DM. It should be an opportunity for the DM to learn from the players and learn how to better play with them. But it also should be an opportunity for the players to actually use the information that they're getting from the DM to actually become better players or to get more involved in the campaign. Obviously, there's those levels of abuse and how many people ask the right kind of questions and not the right kind of questions. But overall, I think the idea is that I've seen some DMs who just aren't really interested, and this is my plea to why it helps players, and why I think that it is important to be available, even if you think that they should know more and they should know better. So let's see here. So kind of just starting off again, this was most of these are going to be focused towards the Discord and the previous 5 parts. So if you haven't looked at that, we have all 5 parts on YouTube. But this is just going to be going to go over some of these. I want to just kind of get some examples. We'll answer some that I think are going to be pertinent to our previous discussions of the Discord, but I'm hoping that some of these will also lead into conversations of like mechanics of High Point, as well as situations that, just spur another discussion of, why it's important to, and answer questions in certain ways, or at least how I imagine why I answer in certain ways that I do. Obviously, a lot of this is going to be either need explanation or it's going to be taken with a grain of salt, because in game, while I'm gaming with people, this is more of how I'm opening up to them. I'm giving them full explanations. And going into detail, especially when I feel it's necessary. However, on the Discord, obviously, most of the questions I was trying to answer more directly and more concisely for the benefit of not only the player, but for everybody to look back on. But at the same time, that's why I want to embellish, because my approach in-game is slightly different than my approach in Discord. Government says 2 things. One, having a tiefling bard, tieflings are related to the fire element, and bards for music, of course. And yeah, no, totally understandable that you wanted to make that more of a connection with fire. And then 2, I remember seeing videos of people filling a pipe with gas, many holes, light the holes on fire, and the music sound waves change the height of the flames in each hole. That's cool. That's dope. Yeah, no, I can see how you came to that. I like that you're pulling all of those pieces together. That's awesome. That's great. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm not gonna read every question that we go off of here, but I am just gonna kind of scroll through and point out ones that we do like. I should also mention too, I was going off of a little bit of a diatribe here, but that was how you decided how to get your tiefling to make music off of looking at fire. And yeah, I do really enjoy listening to how you make these things. Is really just it's great, because it just reminds me of just how me and my gaming groups have come up with different ideas of taking all of the different experiences we have and trying to replicate that in a very creative way that doesn't change how the game works, but it enriches how the game feels. I thought this would make an interesting character for a D&D concept. Yeah, no, absolutely. Kage's character in the Old Gods campaign, in the podcast that we started recording, he's a bard in that one, and he was trying to find some unique ways to like be his own bard and kind of like go out and do his own with that. So I'm really digging that idea of just being like that, allowing the character, not the player, but the character in game to establish themselves like that. I just think is just so much fun when you can really set them apart and just be like, no, I'm not just a bard. I am a one-of-a-kind bard, and for good reason. Not just because I want to be for the game purposes. You actually made a one-of-a-kind bard, and that, I think, can't be underestimated. All right, here. So does the workshop require the use of dev time? So for base stuff, no, it's mainly the area. Okay, so this was just more of a question on how the mechanics of the workshop. And again, these are things where this is why I'm also open to questions, because it also shows me where I may not have been fully prepared or fully detailed in the explanations that I did. So even though this is much more related to the Discord specific, this is a good reason why you want to listen to the questions, because it also may help you see where you're not getting across all the information, because you may think that you've covered everything, but if people are still having questions, just because you covered it doesn't mean that they got it. And that's one of those things where being open to questions and not shutting people down makes sense, because you may have written all this stuff out. You may have covered it in your many dialogue rants. You may have covered it in a write-up. But if I'm asking, it means that it didn't come across to me and it didn't stick with me. And that should be an indication to you as a DM that something is amiss in terms of the communication. You either the storytelling or the way that you're expecting them to remember isn't lining up. And that's why I think that when you listen to their questions, something like this, does the workshop require dev time? There's no reason for me to, not want to answer that question. It tells me that I didn't get that point across before. And I think I ended up going back and updating the description. So again, one of the reasons I want to bring out, and then I'll sidebar about why being more open and paying attention to the questions you're being asked is important in my opinion as a DM. Let's see. The YouTube video link is only 2.5 minutes long. Drats. Which of your guards brought me as the guards secretly a dragon? I could have sworn this would have been an easy place to sneak into. I will have to check that YouTube link out. We haven't figured out exactly how we want to do sharing links here, just because we are still small and we don't have I only have mods like half the time, so I got to be a little bit more protective of what I allow. But I will try to see if I can check that out after stream, and then we'll have to see what we can do. I'll have to talk to Vixie, my main mod, about how we can set up the bot better to allow for sharing, because it's hard for me to keep up with that when I'm running the other programs too. So it's hard to see if I can allow certain links while I'm streaming. So bear with us while we're still working on that for different things that can be shared. Normally I enter D&D chat saying guards are bad and need to hire someone better. But since y'all have follower only, I added a message to that. Which of the guards secretly a dragon? Could I have sworn this would have been an easy place to sneak into? Normally, I enter the guards are bad. Need to hire someone. Oh, actually, Nerdy. Hey, what's up? Thank you for coming in. I didn't even realize. I was still thinking because you're the color is so similar. I thought Cosmic was still talking, so I didn't realize that I was actually talking to somebody else here for a second. So you normally enter the D and she says guards are bad. Your guards are bad and need to be replaced. So your old D&D character has a 24 passive stealth. Jesus, how did you manage that? I'm not even sure how do you even get up to what level were they at that point? 24 passive stealth, man. Like at that point, yeah, you do just like walk everywhere. No reason for anything. Okay, so good reasons to listen to your players, understanding what your storytelling is actually telling them and what it's getting across to them, I think is just something that is good for DMs to keep aware of, and the questions that you're getting will really help you understand like where your players are coming from, and should be guidance ideas, right? Guidance ideas in terms of, if they're constantly asking for players' names, maybe your NPC names are too complicated, or maybe you're not giving enough time for them to really establish that relationship, or maybe you're just not distinguishing your characters enough, right? Those could be indications, and I think that if you're just expecting your players to just know better, you're not evolving as a DM. You're basically expecting them to just deal with you. And I'm not on the team of that. I think that DMs should be the ones trying the hardest to get better. I think the DM should be trying harder than the players to get better. I mean, again, unless you're a very well-established veteran DM and, a celebrity DM, I think that when it comes to the smaller gaming groups, the DM is the one who should be trying the hardest because you have so many more people that you're trying to appease, whereas they're here to play your game that you've made. They're already here, right? They're here to have fun. That's their job. And if you're expecting them to basically work at that, that's going to take away from their fun. It says she has a plus 14 to her stealth at level 13. Can't roll below a 10. She's a level 20. Max roll is 34. Cosmic says Serenade had a plus 23 stealth, max dex of plus 5, plus 4 for proficiency, plus 4 rogue expertise, and a plus 10 from Pass Without Trace. Let's see, what level? At 11th level. Yeah. That would be really interesting to have a stealth off. Just have a whole group of rogues and just have an entire campaign built of who can be the most stealthy. Just who can get through the most situations without being caught. That would be fun. Nerdy only had a plus 4 to dex. Ranger is Ranger 5, Rogue 6. And that was for Cosmic's character. It's going to be hard to keep up. I need to get y'all like different colors names. I need to figure out how I can do that because seeing everybody have the same color is hard to distinguish who's talking. Let's see. All right. So going back over to some of the DM questions, let's see if we can find another good one that will spark something. So is this purchasable? Found one in the links in the general store. Okay, so good. Again, because I'm giving links out to other sources. Just a quick, easy question. Oh, you actually pick your own colors and you happen to pick the same. Okay. I'm still not familiar with everything in chat because I'm actually, surprisingly enough, I do follow a couple people on Twitch, but I don't typically hang out on Twitch and watch streams. Most of the Twitch streamers I watch on YouTube, so I'm not as up to date with all the things on Twitch, but that's hilarious. Let's see here. So more questions. So you have to be at the workshop to making. Do you have to be at the workshop to make things with your tools? So I think this was just more of a clarification question on like, does it take your character away from things? But it doesn't really take. We talked about this before. It didn't really take away. It was one of the areas that was just able to allow for more creative item creations and finding things that weren't normally able to be purchased. Oh, let's see. So, do you have to be at the workshop to make things, or do you make them in game? I'm trying to remember what the question was. So, my answer to that at the time was, so the workshop is not something that will take your character away from raids. Yeah, okay, so that, just like what I was just saying. So, it wasn't meant to be something that, like, your character, since they're doing that, they can't go and do other things. It's just in the idea that during your off time and while your character isn't doing these things, you can go off and have these things done for you on the off time when we're not gaming. Does something like poison count as a magical item? Okay, so that's a good question because in terms of like how we were creating items, they were wondering if poison was considered a magical item in terms of what would be needed to be created. And my call was that you just need the poisoner's kit and then basically one of the following two, either herbalism skill to create the poison from like a natural source, or get the venom or poison from a poisonous animal. And then they could just basically find it. So just kind of expressing more about how I like to add in, instead of just saying you're going to do something, being able to add in like the pieces of what their character is going to go through. Again, building that story and building that connection between what the player wants to do and what the character actually has to go through to get it. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Cosmic to Nerdy. That and she tamed a pet rock. Massive damage per round. DM wanted me to swap out characters as both she and I felt the party relied on my stealth and the rock too much. That is why I now have a Haragon 12th level Kanonsima with the 20s and 4 stats. Yes, because that's not going to be someone that they, rely on too much. I like how your DM was like, this character's too important to the party. Can we kill it off, please? I challenge your DM to make the game more challenging. That's what I would do. Let's see here. So, other than two examples, what are things I could? Okay, so this is a good example. So, what are some other? They wanted more examples of what they could do with the herbalism kit only, and does that they need both herbalism and alchemy to do things like an antitoxin? Some kits will have overlap, and I kind of like to do that as a DM because I do think that there are overlap in many areas, and it's just too much to ask players to add on too many things in order to accomplish the same goal. So having overlap, that would make sense. So again, being able to use an herbalism skill to make a poison versus actually going out and getting a venomous animal and using their venom to make like a poison would be two different approaches. But you would still need a poisoner's kit to turn it into the poison at the end of it. But you wouldn't necessarily require herbalism skill if you didn't have it. There are other ways around it, and I really like to add on those options for players. Let's see. So would you say something like black sap with herbalism? Okay, so this is actually a really good question too. This is kind of another way of how I like to work with player wants in High Point. So they were asking, Vedna was specifically asking about how to make black sap, and would that be a basic like poison? But once I researched it, black sap is kind of like a higher end item. It is 300 gold. So my call at the time, and I do still agree with this, is that it wouldn't just be the normal, hey, I want to just pay half the material cost and I'm going to go out and find it. This was something more along the lines of a special ingredient would be needed to create it. So with that, the roll percentage is there to basically not allow for spamming it. So the roll percentage would be whether or not they have the chance to find it. And then depending on how well that roll was, on how well they were able to find it, would also dictate how much of it they would be able to get. Because normal poison looks like normal poison is about 100 gold and only does a 1d4 damage, whereas black sap was a little bit more powerful. So I wanted to make it to where, again, it wouldn't. The idea for the workshop was them to be able to make the standard poison without buying it at a cheaper cost. Black sap, I didn't want them to be able to make as easily, so you have to make some sort of balance, which I figured the percentile roll, which would indicate their ability to find a rare item or rare ingredient, I think was the right call for that one. And I still do. I still think that is the right call to this day. Cosmic says that the rock was tamed via multiple castings of animal friendship, of course, of the few in-game days, over the course of a few in-game days, 8-hour duration due to spell level compared to the creature's CR. The rock nat 1'd its save, and I kept recasting it to refresh the spell's timer. The DM is too homebrew friendly. Yes. And that's the other thing too. That's the one thing I try. Actually, it's a good example. It's the one thing I try not to do too much with this live stream. Is it's not always about allowing the homebrew. It's again, homebrew and adaptation are two different things. And you're absolutely right. There is such thing as too much homebrew. But I don't think there's too much thing as adaptation. I think you can adapt anything and make it work, but fundamentally changing it to homebrew it to work, I think can be damaging in the wrong hands. Nerdy says they tamed their direwolf via a rope, food, and a sleep spell. Hey, you know what? Whatever it takes. These things are liable to kill you if you fail. So do what you need to do. Okay, so let's go. Fire makes a lot more sense. Forging does. What is the cost of devs? I'm just reading through, trying to find a good question here. Let's see. That's more of an okay, so that was just more of DM or like role-playing questions. Not really something that was way too Discord specific, so I'm not really going to go over that. I think we went over this one in a different episode. This one was really an odd. I think this was more of a, again, text-based RP and what players were supposed to understand. Let's go. So these were questions. Okay, so this question was more about something that happened in an actual combat situation. So I don't think that was really where this should have been. Server update. Okay, so questions about NPCs. Let's see. So aside from the backstory, okay. So this was actual information about the character. They wanted to know basically, is there any information about the location of the orc settlement, noteworthy cities, particular humans, or give specific council members. So this is the information. Basically, she wanted more clarification on her backstory, the things that I had already intentionally added in. So gave her some more information that would help her in her RP with a lot of the NPCs. And let's see. So Venla said they were reading up on some Potter's tools, and they'd like to know what they think about this particular version. So this was looks like it was a custom-built version. So let me go ahead and pop this up. So they wanted to know what I thought about this particular like homebrew version of Potter's tools. And let's see. So new and improved in action. With the first thing to do, you need to gather materials. So I think the reason that I didn't like this one, I thought it was better laid out. I don't like to just read a bunch of text while we're on stream, but I think, yeah. So he wanted to know whether or not I would accept it as a feat that he could do in game. And I just basically felt that it was a bit lacking. Good start to a great idea, but I wanted to pull him on voice so we can get really into like my views. I really wish I would have written this out and didn't get in voice. But the more I use them, the more I see bigger potential. He's onto something, but I think the Potter's Tools can be even more powerful and useful in the hands of the right players. So I think what this particular link was trying to do was really do a little bit more with, like, instead of just making them, they would actually imbue whatever you put into them with stuff. And I liked the idea, but I think with a lot of things, even like with tools, D&D gives a good understanding of what they're for, but they don't give a lot of good examples of what you can really do with them. And I think that's what this failed as well. Is it was a really good starting idea, but didn't really give enough substance to what it could really mean in terms of why you would actually want to have this in your character build if there was an easier way to accomplish the same goals. Let's see what's going on in chat here. Taming a rock with an average DPS of 60 damage per turn, assuming all of its attacks crit. Currently working on a verbal description of one of my characters. And, descriptions of characters are hard, especially when you want to introduce them the right way. I always struggle at how I want to introduce my characters. I always end up doing it, and then I always end up kicking myself thinking I should have done it differently. And the Cosmic says, Serenade wasn't killed off. So this was the one that you and your DM decided not to have around anymore. She wasn't killed off. She left with her rock on a training journey, so that calling the rock to aid us in combat and making it do actions doesn't require an animal handling check every turn as your action. Gotcha. It's for a team portrait my DM is getting us. Oh, that's cool. That's going to be really cool. I wish I was better at being artistic. I would really like to... I like online art, but it also sucks because it's somebody else's. I wish I was more artistic or had more players that were artistic, because I love I love player-generated artwork. I love gaming artwork. It's so much fun. And again, it just makes things so much more tangible, and being able to get into it a little bit more. He's paying someone. Yeah, I've thought about doing that too. But it's such a slippery slope with D&D stuff. Like once you decide to put a little bit of interest and money into something, it's such a slippery slope to just start throwing so much money at it. So I got to be careful. So this was a good option. I do like when players do this, when they bring things that they have found, and instead of saying, hey, you should add this, doing it like this, like, hey, DM, what do you think about this? And letting the DM kind of mull it around instead of telling the DM, because I know some DMs are so prideful that when you suggest that they should do or add something, I know that can kind of rub them the wrong way. So I think that with this, this is a good way to approach it, getting a DM to look at it from their perspective, and then seeing what their initial reaction is, to then suggest whether or not it can be added into their particular gaming session. Ooh, you actually did some AI generated art for your... I have not done that yet. I should... That's actually a really good idea to try to use AI generation for like really good descriptions. I need to play around with that more and see if I can get my characters. I would love to do like an AI generated art of like Zenith and some of my other deities for the game. That would be really dope. That's a good idea. Haven't thought about that yet. Okay, so another question I got: would you apply? Okay, so this is actually a really cool, like, mechanical question. So Venla asked, would you apply the same distance rules of touch applied to distance spell, sorcerer, meta magic, to spell sniper, which is a player handbook feat? So would I apply the same rules of touch applied to that? Okay, so distance spell. When you cast a spell that has a range of 5 feet or greater, you can spend 1 sorcery point to double the range of the spell. When you cast a spell that has a range of touch, you can spend 1 sorcery point to make the range of the spell 30 feet. So he's asking, would I apply the same rules of extension on touch, saying that when you cast a spell that has touch, 1 sorcery point would allow it to go up to 30 feet. He's asking, would I apply that to spell sniper, which is... you have learned techniques to enhance your attacks and certain kinds of spells, gaining the following benefits. When you cast a spell that requires you to make an attack roll, the spell's range is doubled. Your ranged spell attacks ignore half cover and 3/4 cover. You learn 1 cantrip that requires an attack roll. Choose the cantrip from the bard, cleric, sorcerer, blah, blah, blah. Your spell casting ability for this cantrip depends on the spell list you choose from. Okay, so I think his question was basically at that first part. When you cast a spell that requires you to make an attack roll, the spell's range is doubled. He's asking, would I apply the same rule as above, which is boosting a touch spell beyond touch? Did I not answer him? Oh, he had to at me. I put in the description. Did you see this? Oh, I did. It was just late. Okay, so I haven't gone back to it yet. So now that I'm looking back on this, I would not apply. I don't think I would apply these because they're two different aspects. And I don't know if I would apply the concept of spell sniper to allow a touch spell to go up to 30 feet. I don't know if I would do that today, but let's see what I did when I reviewed it. So if I read this, if you're a sorcerer and thus gain distance spell, if you forgo the ability score increase to take the feat spell sniper, then yes, it would stack as written. Thus, a touch spell could turn into a 60-foot ranged. But if I just have the spell sniper feat, would a touch spell be 30? Oh, okay. I see. Okay, so I see where I took this. So at first I thought he was saying if you had both. So if you had the distance spell activated, turning a touch into a 30-foot spell, and then you also had spell sniper, which doubled it, then I was saying that was okay. He was asking, can sniper spell or spell sniper turn a touch spell into a 30-foot spell? And then no, the doubling of the distance does not affect touch. And I stand by that 100%. Touch is not a distance. Touch is a aspect. So I don't believe that doubling touch equates to 30 feet. Even though it says when you cast a spell that requires you to make an attack roll, which would be Shocking Grasp. Yes, because you can't double touch. That does not have a distance to double. And I still stand by that. I still stand by the fact that just because the effect could be the effect could double the distance, if it doesn't have a distance, then it wouldn't be able to be doubled. Let's see. Cosmic saying you don't think you can use 2 meta magic effects on one spell at the same time. Oh, and that's why you have Find Familiar. I don't think. Yeah, I still stand by what I'm saying here. Is I don't think that touch could ever be double distanced. I think that if anything, you could make a justification for touch being able to extend to like 5 feet or someone that's like 5 or 10 feet away as like an empowerment. But I really don't think. I don't think that it would make sense to double touch. I think there would be a different mechanic for it. Hang on 1 second. I'm getting a text about dinner. Well, it looks like we're going to do In-N-Out for dinner. All right. So let's see. So he says, so yeah, even though it's textual, yeah, so yeah, you can't double touch. So you would not agree with touch implies you reach. So he's trying to make the argument that touch indicates you reach. Your reach, which would be 5 feet, could be doubled to 10 feet. So he's trying to make the argument that touch has a range of 5 feet, therefore doubling it to 10 feet would not, or he's trying to say that, yeah, you could double that. And that's, to me, I still say that that doesn't make sense because touch is not a distance. Touch is your physical body. It's your hand. You can't double the length of your hand because the effect isn't away from you. Touch doesn't mean that the effect is up to 5 feet away from you. This effect happens. You still have to be able to physically touch them, and by extending that range, you'd be extending your physicalness. Whereas if you're going to be able to cast something at a distance and that's where the effect takes place, that is what you're doubling. You're doubling the distance the effect takes place, not the source of it. So I said yes because you can't double touch. That does not. Okay, so he says. So he's trying to make the argument that reach is 5 feet, so therefore he wants to double it to 10. But I say, but in that case, the spell is not traveling and thus does not require distance. You would need something like distance spell that turns touch spells into range spells. But as it stands, touch spells require physical touch. So yeah, exactly what I'm saying. I said it back then. I'm saying it now. Touch is touch because it still requires your physical body. It is not... traveling. The spell itself is not traveling, you are. So therefore you wouldn't be able to do you wouldn't be able to double a touch spell unless you detach the need for you to be the thing touching. And then of course, and again, this is what I love about Venla or Kage. This is Kage's character. This is what I really like about he and I when we talk, is as much as we get into debates and as much as we sit there and not pick things apart. Like, as you can see, he's trying to make sense of it, and it's not so much that he's trying to tell me that I'm wrong or he's trying to give me reasons. It just comes down to, like he just said, fair enough, I feel that. He just wants to make it make sense. He needs to know that it makes sense, and he needs to know my reasoning. It's not just me making a call of, no, I'm not letting you do that. He wants to hear this. It's the spell is not traveling, thus there's no distance to double. That's what he needed to hear to be like, okay, I get it. Because when I said before... no, it doesn't double distance. He's looking at it as, but it says it's an attack roll. It says that he implies that it's a 5 foot distance. So he's trying to use that, but it wasn't until I said, but touch is not traveling. And therefore he was fine with that. That is the kind of openness that would be like ideal for most DMs and players, but is not common. And this is why how you answer, I think, matters. I mean, as you can see with me, I'm very open to the idea and I'm very open to giving him my reasons. I don't just hand wave him away and say, no, that's not allowed. But at the same time, I stick with my ruling. I constantly said, you can't double touch regardless of what he gave me, but I listened to him. I listened to what he said and I gave him my understanding based on what he said, but still the understanding of the rule that I said, or that as I see it. And although we don't always agree, it's as long as you have an understanding between DM and players, these kind of conversations will be easier, not so much arguments. You just both have to, you both have to agree that I don't like the idea that the DM's always right, but you both have to agree to come to some sort of understanding. Kage may not always agree with my rulings, and I may not always agree with his and our understanding of rules, but at the end of the day, once we've at least understood where we're coming from, we're okay accepting what it has to be. Whether I accept that his explanation makes more sense or whether he accepts that that's just not how I want to run the game. But at the end of the day, for us, the debate isn't about who's right and who's wrong. It's more about making sure that we both understand why it is the way it is, and it's not just being hand-waving. And that's just really big on us. Both as players and DMs, we're both very big on making sure that it makes sense. And I know that's a lofty goal to have with a D&D game that has magic and gods and fantasy, but the idea that if it's just there to just be there, it diminishes it can diminish a lot of like what players are striving for, because they understand it more, and if you give them the reasonings behind things, they can go with that and work with that information instead of just saying you can't do that. He now fully understands why he can't do that, and then he can use my explanation to then try something else because of this limitation. He'll be able to make sure that attempts that he does in the future are more within the realm of what my expectations are, but he'll also be able to call me out and be like, hey, you actually established this. And those are the things that I think are good on both sides. You know, there's too many DMs who will just kind of hand wave out, that's just what I want it to be. And the downside with that is it doesn't establish consistency, which makes it more difficult for your players to become better players. Because if there's no consistency in your rules, how are they supposed to play within those rules and become more challenging to you? Because yeah, anybody can just be a DM who's just always TPKing their parties. Anybody can be a DM who just always has the right, you know, spell at hand. But that's not what players are there for, and that's not what makes better players. Better players are constantly being challenged and then challenging the DM back, and that is what makes those higher levels so much more entertaining, because you shouldn't be just dealing with more difficult monsters. If all you're doing is throwing a more difficult monster but not making the gameplay any more challenging or strategic, then no one's really learning. You're basically just playing the numbers. And I mean, if that's your gameplay, that's fine. But I think with most people, the aspect of roleplay isn't in the numbers, it's in the cause and effect of the actions that are being taken. Going back to chat, had a DM who told me that I could cast a ritual spell via ritual while walking at a normal pace. Oh, okay. What about enlarge reduce? Okay, so it has a range of 30 feet, and what if you use twin spell? If it applies to 2 creatures, you can choose for both, or if one grows and shrinks, both do. You can grow one and shrink the other. Oh, okay, so you're asking basically, so okay, so hold on here. Let me look up Twin Spell. Let me make sure I understand the mechanics behind Twin Spell, and then we'll answer that question. So you're saying that you have the spell, which Enlarge, which also has the reverse of Reduce. So you have Enlarge and Reduce, and we want Twinned Spell. Did I spell that wrong? Twinned spell under sorcerer. Okay. Okay, so can you use a twin spell on a spell duplicates the cast time of a wish spell. Okay, so use twin spell to affect a particular spell. Okay, so hey, so this actually talks about it. So let's see what twin spell is all about. So you can use twin spell on a spell that targets only one creature, doesn't have a range of self, is incapable of targeting more than one creature at the spell's current level. If you know the rule yet are still unsure whether a particular spell qualifies for twin spell, consult with your DM, who has the final say. If you two are curious about our design or intent, disqualify the spell for us. Spell has a range of spell. So these are disqualifiers. The spell can target an object. The spell allows you to choose more than one creature to be affected, particularly at the level you're casting the spell. Some spells increase their number of potential targets when you cast them at higher levels. The spell can force more than one creature to make a saving throw before the spell's duration expires. The spell lets you make a roll of any kind that can affect more than one creature before the spell's duration expires. So I don't know if your situation... I don't know if a situation, if this follows your situation. So let's say, so you mistyped that. So you're in a campaign where your artificer has been ritual casting while walking. And it's not like he is doing circles of teleportation. He was doing identify. I was wanting to start casting alarm in my other game. And while walking, I would be retreating like we were. Okay. So let's see. So let's go back to, in terms of large and reduce, it has a range of 30. And if you wanted to use twin spell, if it applies to, so based off of what they were saying here, in terms of the twin spell, it looks like it wouldn't be able to cast or be targeted. It wouldn't be able to target 2 people. It looks like, I don't know if that's a baseline for it. Enlarge Reduce is one creature, but Twin Spell makes it 2. If you make one creature grow, you can make the other shrink. Okay, so the idea for Twin Spell is it will... Okay, here we go. Twin Spell. When you cast a spell that targets only one creature and doesn't have a range of self, you can spend a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level to target a second creature. Okay, that's what I needed to hear. In a range, one sorcery point. Okay. To enable... to be eligible, the spell must be incapable of targeting more than... Okay, so you're aware of that. So Magic Missile, Scorching Ray aren't eligible, but Ray of Frost and Chromatic Orb are. So in this particular case, that's a fascinating question. So you're basically saying that if you were able to double a spell, do you get to control each spell individually? Versus are you just doubling the effect? So when you cast a spell that targets only one creature and doesn't have a range of self, you can spend a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level to target a second creature in range with the same spell. Okay, so that right there, I think, is where I'm going to have to make the ruling because of with the same spell. So I read this as you are not doubling the spell. You are not casting two spells. How I read this is you were taking that spell and you are allowing that spell to target more than one creature. With that, yes. Well, it says same spell, but not same effect. But that's where you have to get down to, again, how you read that. Because it's targeting the same spell, and I don't read this as you are getting a new spell. You're not casting a different spell. You are casting one spell, and when you cast a spell like Enlarge, you need to choose Large or Reduce. So once you've cast that spell, twinning it is only going to, in my opinion, cast the same spell, which you would have to identify as Enlarge or Reduce. In my opinion, if you were to use Enlarge and then Reduce on a different creature, in my opinion, that would be two different spells because the spell does one or the other effect. It doesn't do both. So technically, and again, this is how I interpret how spells are, even though the spell technically does one or the other, I would still interpret that as there is a change that needs to be made. So either you're saying a different word, or you have a different symmetrical aspect, or even a different ingredient. Something about the spell would change to imply that new effect. So I would say that if you're going to say shrink one creature or reduce one creature, and then you twin it to another, both creatures would take the reduction. In that particular case with twin spell, that would be my high point ruling, is it would double the effect because it's not creating a new spell. It's just adding a target to the one you've already decided to cast. So yeah, unless there was other verbiage that would indicate this. Now, granted, that it's interesting that they use Chromatic Orb here, and I wish they would have expanded upon that because Chromatic Orb has multiple effects. So I would have to make the same ruling. You know, if you're going to do Chromatic Orb and you choose a color, I don't think that twinning it would allow you to do multiple types of Chromatic Orb. I think you would still get whichever one that you wanted to choose. So yeah, in that particular case, high point ruling would be you're essentially just adding targets, but whatever you chose to happen would be the thing that happens. So let's see here. So, but that's back to the other comment. So, let's see. We were talking about. DM told me that you could do this. So, it's a ritual spell via ritual while walking at a normal pace. So you were basically allowed to do basically any ritual while walking. I can't remember how ritual spell casting normally works, to be honest, off the top of my head. What kind of character were you when you were doing the rituals? You said I mistyped that you were campaign. You were artificer. But I don't think I have ritual caster prerequisite. Ritual seeking rituals. Okay. So you said you took the ritual caster feat and you've been wanting to use rituals but never seem to have time. I was curious you want to know what I thought. Personally, I think there are many rituals that can be cast moving as long as your concentration is kept. I was not allowed to do it. You weren't allowed to do it. You're an arcane trickster rogue with a ritual caster feat. What if a targeted creature is already at the smallest or largest possible size? Can large reduce past that? Two different questions. So let me look at ritual caster real quick. Let's tackle that. Because I want to see if ritual caster has anything specifically written into it. So you have learned a limited number of spells that you can cast as rituals. These spells are written in a ritual book, which you must have in hand when casting them. When you choose this feat, you acquire a ritual book holding two first level spells of your choice, choosing one of the following classes. You choose your spells a class list. The spells you choose must have a ritual tag. The class you choose must also have a ritual tag. The class you choose must also determine your spellcasting ability. If you go to a spell, book, blah, 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 and you must have the ritual processing copy in 2 hours. Okay, but 5e... Ritual. Okay, so ritual casting allows players to cast spells as rituals, which increases a spell's casting time by 10 minutes, but doesn't consume a spell slot. Gotcha. Okay. Your wizard ritual spellcaster that gives the most amount. So wizards, bards, druids, clerics, and artificers can all do ritual casting as part of their class abilities, but others can't. Interesting. So far, I'm not seeing any reason. Why wouldn't you be able... So, for example, however, ritual takes 11 minutes to cast. So is that why they weren't allowing you to? Because it takes so long to cast that for some reason they were saying that you would have to have too much concentration to walk at a normal pace. I mean, I totally understand the aspect of being able to limit your movement speed while doing like a ritual because you are concentrating very hard. So I would see them wanting to say slow down your movement. I mean, I'm trying to also understand why, like how beneficial or how detrimental it would be to have full speed while casting rituals. So I see, I see an argument for both here because of the concept of rituals are more powerful and the fact that they are, because they're not doing spell slots and they're not kind of like innate in the moment, you're actually taking time with them. I could see the argument that by walking, it would make it a little bit more difficult. So by doing the ritual, you might have to go a little bit slower. I can see that argument. I don't know. I haven't dealt with many players who go the ritual route. So I can understand if I tried to move the ritual cast teleportation circle. Oh, gotcha, because teleportation circle is like anybody within your range. And maybe that's it. Maybe what it would come down to is it would really depend upon the spell and the ritual itself. Maybe I would just have like the, lower end rituals, like for low spells wouldn't require it, but maybe the higher the level or something like teleportation would be like, well, you're imbuing the direct area, so you can't keep moving. The spell you chose was alarm. See, okay, so that... Yeah, I can understand that because alarm, for something that would like affect a very specific location, I could see that. I could see the argument being made that you need to be at that location to set the spell properly. Similar with like teleportation circle. But again, I think this would... I think I would rather go that route. I don't think I would make a overall call because I think there are too many situations where it would be more in line to allow it sometimes and not allow it others. Because like again, those are two great examples: alarm, or teleportation circle, or even like what's the magic word mouth where like you set a trigger and then you get like message. Like those I would make sense to have to be at the location because you're trying to infuse essentially a spot with magic to do something. But if it's something that would affect like the party, like an individual, as long as you're walking with them and it's not like a very, very complicated high level spell, I don't see why certain spells wouldn't be able to be ritualed while walking at normal pace. I think it would just really be whatever they're trying to do. You know, I'm like, let's say they're trying to imbue a weapon. Why wouldn't you be able to walk while imbuing a weapon that you're currently carrying or holding? Like, I don't see, that wouldn't make much sense. But something like alarm that's going to be at a physical location, I would understand why walking away and constantly getting further and further away would make it understandable why that wouldn't make sense. So I think for me, I would just rule that it really would depend on what they're trying to do with the ritual. And then going back to your other question. So what if, so let me look up Enlarge, and because I don't know if it has anything, but I think, I want to say it does have a limitation. Now, I'm actually curious, can you define, when you say that, what if a target creature is already at the smallest or largest possible size? So do you mean mechanically, like D&D largest size? I like getting an explanation over just saying you can't ritual cast and walk. Thank you. Yes, thank you. I'm very happy to give more than just a yes or no, because yeah, I don't like that. And again, just kind of like with Kage has taught me a lot about this. When you give the explanation, players can do more with it, and it's more satisfying than just you're not allowed to. It's just, it makes more sense, and it allows the players more agency after the fact, because now they have knowledge that they can use, and I feel like that's more empowering, because with knowledge you can get around your problem versus just being told you have a problem. But yeah, so let's look at Enlarge. So let's see. So you can cause a creature or object to grow larger or smaller for the duration. Choose either a creature or object the target is unwilling. Constitution check the creature target. Everything is wearing and carrying changes size with it. Any item dropped is unaffected. The target size doubles in all dimensions, and its width is multiplied by 8. Growth increases by size by 1 category from medium to large. For example, if there isn't enough room for the target to double size, the creature object attains the maximum possible size for the space available until the space ends. The target also has advantage. The target's weapon grows, reduce. Let's see. So blah, blah, blah. The reduction decreases the size by 1 category, for example, until the spell ends. The target has also disadvantage. Also shrinks as much as its size. So interesting here. They go so far as to... Okay, so they've done 2 things here, guys. In one space, they have mentioned, like on Enlarge, it can only go as big as the space will allow. So you can't crush a creature by doubling its size in a room it can't fit in. But on the same token, it also specifies that the growth increases its size from one category to another. So medium to large or medium to small. That causes me 2 trains of thought. Initially speaking, because it capped the max size as the space available, but did not cap the reduction size, I wanted to lean that there would be no cap. However, based off of the fact that it does specify category, I do believe that based off of your question, Cosmic, what if a target is already at its smallest or largest category, I think that the spell fails. I do not think that it will allow for a category outside of the normal boundaries. However, I do believe that there is room to allow this to happen for RP purposes for a lot of different reasons. So as the spell itself is, as a second level spell, I would say that it is capped at its categories. However, there is definitely room for upcasting, either upcasting or a divine version of this spell, or an immortal version of this spell, or even I forget what they call it, but the thing where you can have like multiple wizards cast the same spell together and it infuses all together, and then they boost it. Shit like that I would allow for going beyond the category, but because they mentioned it as a second level spell just as is, you'd be capped at categories. Ohm to allow this, unlike the space. Oh, room to allow this, unlike the space the target creature is in. There's enough room. So unlike the space. So do you mean like yeah. So it's not so much like the space, like the space that they're standing in, but like if you shoved them in like let's say a jail cell and then tried to double their size so big that the room itself would like squash them. That I think that's what it's trying to prevent. But if they're like on a pillar and it's a 5-foot pillar and you make them so big they can't stand on it and then they fall into a crevice, I think that's totally doable. I don't think it's the space that they stand in. It's the physical space so as not to abuse it by, say, locking someone. Like you could lock someone in a chest and then cast this on them and then squash them. Although uniquely, on the other side of this, it doesn't say that you wouldn't be able to put someone in something, because you can't enlarge someone so big that the space that they're in crushes them. But it doesn't say that you can't reduce something that has someone in it. Although, wait, does this actually require a creature, though? So you cause a creature. Okay, so it has to be a creature. And everything. Yeah, interesting. So room to allow this. Okay, so I can't wait to find the spell Find Familiar so I can copy it down in my ritual book. Man, Find Familiar as a ritual would be, that would be dope. Especially for if you can have, if you have one of those, like, just, if you can stack them too. If you could just be able to, like, just grab familiars. Let's see. So shrink them and put them in a bag of devouring. So you know what's interesting? So it won't allow you... So I think part of the enlarged thing, too, is it won't allow you to reduce them, put them inside something, and then bring them back to normal size and kill them that way. Yeah, but it is interesting that... It's interesting that it requires a space that they can fill. So yeah, you wouldn't be able to do the one direction. Since it does require a creature, you can't put them inside something. But I do like the idea of I do like what you guys are thinking, though, and I would say that again, I would say that as a second level spell, unfortunately, it does seem to be capped at the categories. But I like the idea of being able to either upcast it and go beyond that, or have a powerful enough creature be able to cast something similar and go beyond that. All right. Well, I think my dinner is just about here, so I'm gonna go and grab my dinner. Thank you so much for joining us today. Nerdy, thank you so much for joining the stream. I hope you come back. Cosmic, thank you always for joining us and providing me some content to talk about. I really like this conversation. I was hoping I would get more into the DM questions of the Discord, or at least I thought I was going to, but you guys gave me so much more to talk about, and I really thank you guys so much for that. That's exactly what I really want this podcast, this live stream to be about, is more discussing with you guys what you guys think and giving you my perspectives on what I would do in High Point. Like, that's really what I enjoy doing, more than just telling people how I think they should game. I like the conversations and I like the collaborations, because I'm not here to steal your guys' ideas. I have a very solid foundation for what I like, but I want to help people flesh out their ideas. Whether or not I give you things that won't work, but at least you know they won't work, and I give you those things, or if I can give you things that you will take and use, doesn't matter. I'm here for those ideas. I want to give you my thoughts and have that spur better thoughts in you. And so you can take that and make your games better. So again, thank you so much. Nerdy, we are here every Monday and Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I will enjoy my food. Thank you. But D&D Discussions is every Monday and Thursday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we just talk about everything. My co-host Kage is usually here on Mondays. He will not be here this coming Monday. He has some things with his church group, so he will be out, but it will just be me. And I do also just do pop-up streams, so I'll play games. Like right now I'm going through a playthrough of Shadows of Doubt, which is a really cool procedurally generated detective game. So kind of the description reminded me of like how I like to run my D&D campaigns, because it's basically like everything's just happening and you just have to kind of keep up with it. And it's a really interesting take on the procedural generated world. But yeah, I do those every now and again. Don't have a schedule for those. I just pop those up. So if you see me live, feel free to come join me. Otherwise, Mondays and Thursdays are always D&D, and you can find all of my all of the old streams. Everything gets recorded to YouTube, so you can go to at MisfitGamersStudios on YouTube and see all of the previous podcasts. We have a 5-part series that went over this particular Discord and talked about the whole campaign there and all of the different sections that you see here, just all of the things that I created. And then we've also had just other discussions about just aspects of gaming, how Kage and I approach things. And yeah, that's just what we're here for, man. So you like these solo streams more, less being sidetracked at every sentence. Yeah, I'm really happy with this. I've been slowly developing that groove. At first it was just random topics that I came up with that day, and now we're into a lot more of this, like, audience discussion. Cosmic usually every week will provide us at least a new homebrew idea he's working on. So what Kage and I will do is we'll break that apart. We'll see how we like it as it's written. We'll give some feedback on both how we would approach it as players, as DMs ourselves. I'll usually kind of throw out there what I would do to make it fit High Point, my realm, and how it would work best with me and my gamers. And then I'll just give it a rating, and then hopefully that helps him develop it. So also, if you're working on anything and you want to get our opinion, we can work with that too, and we'll talk with you about it on stream, because that's just, we're really into that. We just really want to. Our kind of motto here on D&D Discussions is beyond the book. It's trying to get people to realize that not all about homebrew, not about making your own things and deciding your own rules, but using the books as your foundation and then going beyond them. Again, that adaptation of the rules to make sense for you, that's what I want to promote, and that's why we're here not to tell you how you should play and how you need to work with things, but I'm here to give you my perspective because mine's different than yours. Kage's is different than mine, and we're here because I want you to hear all of them. I love the fact that you two were talking too, because I want the community to give out all of the possible ideas to show people there is no one way to play this game. That's like the biggest message I can give out is there's no wrong way to play D&D as long as you're having fun, and I'm just here to show people there's no wrong ideas. There's just ideas. So I hope you come back. Thank you so much for the follow. I did see that. Come back Mondays and Thursdays, or if you ever see me pop up for the games, feel free to come in and say hi. I'm going to go enjoy my dinner. I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. Have a wonderful weekend. Keep gaming, keep enjoying D&D, and I will see you next week. Take care.